Sloan Mercer's hand froze midair, the birthday cake knife glinting under fluorescent lights as the laughter in the conference room died like someone had cut the oxygen. Across the table, Noah Lane, quiet, steady, supposedly safe Noah Lane, met her eyes with a look that wasn't angry, wasn't hurt, just unnervingly calm. "What if I say yes?" His voice carried in the sudden silence, and Sloan felt the ground shift beneath her $1,000 heels. She'd meant it as a joke, a throwaway line to show she was human, approachable, one of them. But Noah wasn't laughing, and neither, suddenly, was anyone else. Before we dive into this story of unexpected proposals, corporate warfare, and second chances, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The morning had started like every other Wednesday since Sloan Mercer became the youngest CEO in TechCore Industries' 40-year history. She'd arrived at 6:30 when the building still smelled like industrial cleaning solution and possibility, when the coffee maker in the executive break room hadn't yet been discovered by the masses. She'd reviewed quarterly projections, approved 3 budget proposals, and composed a carefully worded email to the board explaining why their preferred candidate for VP of Operations was, in her professional opinion, a complete disaster waiting to happen. By 9:15, she was already exhausted, but she'd perfected the art of looking energized. It was part of the uniform, the sharp blazer, the heels that added 3 inches to her 5'6" frame, the smile that suggested confidence without arrogance. At 34, she was acutely aware that half the company saw her as an experiment, and the other half was waiting for her to fail spectacularly. The birthday celebration for Marcus Chen, one of their senior developers, hadn't been her idea. Sloan generally avoided company celebrations the way other people avoided root canals. But her assistant, the terrifyingly efficient Priya Sharma, had insisted it would be good for morale and humanizing if the new CEO made an appearance. 10 minutes. Priya had said that morning, blocking Sloan's path to her office with the determination of a bouncer at an exclusive club. "That's all I'm asking. Cut the cake, say something nice about teamwork, let people see you're not a robot." "I'm not a robot," Sloan had protested. "Debatable," Priya had replied, but she'd been smiling. "Conference room B, 11 o'clock. I've already cleared your calendar." So at 11 o'clock, Sloan found herself in Conference Room B, which someone had decorated with streamers that looked like they'd been purchased during a clearance sale in 2003. The cake was from Costco, chocolate with vanilla frosting and "Happy Birthday Marcus" spelled out in blue icing that was already starting to melt under the fluorescent lights. About 30 employees had crammed into the space, most of them looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else but understood that attendance was the price of being perceived as a team player. Marcus stood near the cake, looking uncomfortable in the way that people over 30 generally looked when forced to be the center of attention over something as mundane as aging another year. He was a good guy, competent, reliable, the kind of employee who showed up, did excellent work, and never caused drama. Exactly the kind of person Sloan wished she could clone. "Should I say something?" Sloan murmured to Priya, who had somehow materialized at her elbow like a well-dressed guardian angel. "Brief remarks?" "Emphasis on brief," Priya whispered back. "And smile. You have resting CEO face." Sloan cleared her throat, and the room's ambient noise dropped by half. It still startled her, that immediate attention, the way rooms reorganized themselves around her presence now. 6 months ago, she'd been the VP of Strategic Development, mostly invisible except during quarterly reviews. Now she was the sun, and everyone else had been forced into orbit. "I'll keep this short because I know everyone has actual work to do," Sloan began, and got a few appreciative chuckles. "Good." Self-deprecating humor played well. "Marcus has been with TechCore for 8 years, which in tech years is basically forever. He's led 3 major product launches, mentored half the development team, and according to his manager, he's the reason our cloud infrastructure didn't collapse during the Watson merger. So, thank you, Marcus. We're lucky to have you." She meant it, every word. But she could see the calculation in people's eyes, trying to determine if she was being genuine or performing sincerity for the cameras that existed only in their paranoid imaginations. Marcus gave a little wave, his ears reddening. "Thanks, Sloan. Thanks, Mrs. Mercer." "Sloan's fine," she said. even though it wasn't, not really. The distance between CEO and employee required certain formalities, certain boundaries. But she was trying to thread an impossible needle, authoritative but approachable, powerful but relatable, confident but not arrogant. She picked up the knife to cut the cake, and someone, Jenna from marketing, probably, she loved these moments, started a chorus of "Happy Birthday." Sloane joined in, her voice lost in the off-key cacophony, and felt the familiar dissonance of participating in human rituals while simultaneously observing herself participate, wondering if she was doing it correctly, if anyone could tell she was faking the ease of it all. The song ended. Sloane cut the first piece and handed it to Marcus. Then she started cutting more pieces, and people queued up with paper plates like she was running a very sad buffet. That's when Jenna, because of course it was Jenna, decided to turn the moment into something else entirely. "You know what Marcus needs?" Jenna announced to the room, her voice bright with the kind of mischief that Sloane had learned to recognize as dangerous. "A wife. Someone to appreciate all this kindness and reliability." "I'm standing right here," Marcus said, but he was grinning. "I'm just saying you're prime husband material," Jenna continued, warming to her theme. Several people laughed. "Stable job. Great with people. Probably amazing with kids." "I have a fish," Marcus offered. "Does that count?" "It's a start," someone called out, and more laughter rippled through the room. Sloane smiled, playing along, but she was already calculating her exit strategy. These things had a way of spiraling, and she needed to be back at her desk for a 1:30 call with their Singapore office. She glanced at her watch, 11:14. Acceptable. She could feasibly extract herself in the next 2 minutes. Then Jenna turned her attention to Noah Lane. Noah stood near the back of the room, partially hidden by a filing cabinet that someone had inexplicably left in the conference room months ago. He was holding a paper plate with a modest slice of cake, not eating it, just holding it like he'd forgotten what to do with his hands. He was the kind of person who seemed to occupy space apologetically, as if constantly aware he was taking up room that might be needed by someone more important. Sloane knew him, but only in the way she knew most of the employees: name, department, general reputation. Noah Lane, project manager, development division, competent, quiet. That was the extent of her knowledge, though she'd seen his name on enough successful project reports to know he was good at his job. "Now Noah," Jenna said, and Sloane saw Noah's shoulders tense slightly, saw the way he seemed to shrink even further behind the filing cabinet. Noah is the real catch here. Single dad, never complains, saves everyone's disasters. He's like the perfect husband hiding in plain sight. A few people murmured agreement. Noah's face had gone carefully neutral in the way that people's faces do when they're being discussed and want to disappear into the walls. "We should set him up with someone," another voice chimed in. David from finance, Sloane thought, though she wasn't certain. Seriously, the man's a saint. "Maybe he doesn't want to be set up," Noah said quietly, but his voice was drowned out by the gathering momentum of the conversation, the way groups of people sometimes decided collectively to turn someone into their entertainment for the afternoon. "What about you, Sloane?" Jenna asked, turning her bright, mischievous smile on the CEO. "You're single, right? Maybe you two should get together." The room went still in that particular way that happens when someone crosses a line, but no one's quite sure if they're allowed to acknowledge it. Sloane felt every eye turned toward her, felt the weight of the moment pressing down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. This was a test. She understood that immediately. If she reacted with offense, she'd seem uptight, unable to take a joke. If she ignored it, she'd seem cold, above it all. She needed to thread the needle again, acknowledge the humor, deflect the attention, maintain her authority without seeming authoritarian. She laughed. It was a good laugh, practiced, the kind that suggested she was in on the joke rather than the butt of it. "I think Noah might be a little out of my league," Sloane said lightly, and got the laugh she was aiming for. Perfect. Self-deprecating, complimentary to Noah, diffusing the tension. But Jenna wasn't done. "Come on, imagine the wedding, the CEO and the mysterious project manager. It'd be like a corporate fairy tale." More laughter. Noah had gone very still, his knuckles white around his paper plate. Sloane could see the discomfort radiating off him in waves, could see that he wanted this to end as much as she did, and in that moment she felt a flash of something, Not quite kinship, but recognition. They were both trapped in this moment, both trying to navigate the invisible rules of human social interaction that everyone else seemed to understand instinctively. She needed to end this, cleanly, definitively, with humor that would let everyone save face and move on with their lives. The idea came to her like a lightning strike, brilliant, sudden, and catastrophically stupid, though she wouldn't realize the catastrophic part until several seconds later. Sloane turned to face Noah directly, let her smile widen into something playful, conspiratorial. She was performing now, fully committed to the bit, to being the cool CEO who could take a joke and dish it back out. "So Noah," she said, pitching her voice to carry across the room, playing to the audience that had suddenly forgotten all about Marcus and his birthday. "What do you say? Will you marry me?" The room exploded. Laughter, whistles, a few scattered cheers. Someone, probably Marcus, grateful to no longer be the center of attention, started a slow clap. Jenna was practically doubled over, delighted that her small moment of mischief had been so spectacularly amplified by the CEO herself. Sloane grinned, pleased with herself, already mentally composing the story she'd tell Priya later about how she'd handled an awkward situation with grace and humor. She'd made them laugh. She'd been relatable. What if I say yes? Noah's voice cut through the laughter like a scalpel through skin. Quiet, steady, completely serious. The room died. The laughter didn't taper off naturally. It simply stopped, cut short by collective confusion. Sloane felt her smile freeze on her face, felt the moment stretch and distort like taffy pulled too far. Noah was looking at her, and his expression wasn't playful. It wasn't angry either. It was something else entirely, something careful and deliberate and utterly unexpected. His dark eyes held hers across the 15 feet of conference room, across the abandoned cake and paper plates and suddenly forgotten birthday celebration, and Sloane realized with dawning horror that he wasn't joking. Sloane started, then stopped. Her mouth had gone dry. The room was so silent she could hear the humming of the fluorescent lights overhead, could hear someone's stomach growling, could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "I mean, you asked," Noah continued, still in that same quiet, even tone. "It seems rude not to answer." He wasn't smiling. That was what struck Sloane most forcefully. He wasn't smiling at all. This wasn't him playing along with the joke. This was him doing something else entirely, something she didn't understand and she had no idea how to respond. "I was kidding," Sloane said, and her voice came out wrong, too defensive, too sharp. She tried to soften it with a laugh, but it sounded forced even to her own ears. "Obviously, it was a joke." "Obviously," Noah echoed, but there was something in his tone, something that might have been disappointment, or might have been resignation, or might have been nothing at all. "My mistake." He set his paper plate down on the filing cabinet with careful precision, the cake untouched. Then he walked out of the conference room, moving past the crowd of frozen coworkers with the kind of dignity that Sloane associated with people leaving disaster sites. Controlled, purposeful, determined not to run, even though every instinct must be screaming at them to flee. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded, in the continued silence, like a gunshot. Sloane stood there, knife still in hand, feeling like she'd just stepped on a landmine and was waiting to see if it would detonate. Around her, people were starting to move again, to murmur, to exchange glances that ranged from confused to amused to deeply uncomfortable. "Well," Marcus said finally, with the air of someone trying to salvage an unsalvageable situation, "this is definitely going down as my most memorable birthday." A few people laughed, shakily, grateful for the permission to move past the moment. The party started to dissolve naturally after that, people drifting back to their desks, the cake half-eaten and already starting to look sad and abandoned, the streamers hanging limply like they too understood the celebration was over. Priya appeared at Sloane's elbow. "That was," she began, then seemed to run out of words. "A disaster," Sloane supplied. Her hands were shaking slightly. She set the knife down before anyone could notice. "That was a complete disaster." "He's probably just embarrassed," Priya said, but she didn't sound convinced. "You know how Noah is. Private. He'll get over it." But Sloane wasn't sure about that. She replayed the moment in her head, the way Noah's expression had shifted when she said it was obviously a joke, The careful way he'd set down his plate, the straight-back dignity with which he'd walked out. That hadn't been embarrassment. That had been something else. That had been hurt. "I need to apologize," Sloane said. "Maybe give him some space first," Priya suggested. "Let everyone forget about it. By tomorrow, it'll be just another awkward office moment." But as Sloane walked back to her office, she had the unsettling feeling that Priya was wrong. This wasn't going to be forgotten by tomorrow. This was going to be the story people told about her for years. The time the new CEO accidentally proposed to someone as a joke and humiliated him in front of the entire development team. She'd wanted to be relatable. Instead, she'd been cruel. The realization sat in her stomach like a stone for the rest of the day. Sloane didn't see Noah again until late that afternoon. She'd been in back-to-back meetings, the Singapore call, then a budget review, then a tense conversation with the board chair about fourth-quarter projections that had gone 20 minutes longer than scheduled. By the time she emerged from the executive conference room, it was past 5, and the office had entered that strange twilight zone where the day shift was leaving and the night shift of obsessive workaholics was just ramping up. She was walking back to her office, already mentally composing her exit strategy so she could be home by 7, optimistic, but possible if she left in the next 10 minutes, when she saw him. Noah was in one of the small collaboration spaces on the 3rd floor, the kind with glass walls that were supposed to promote transparency and open communication, but mostly just meant that everyone could watch you work. He was alone, hunched over his laptop, a cold cup of coffee beside him, and a stack of folders that suggested he'd be there for a while. Sloane slowed. She should keep walking, should go back to her office, grab her bag, leave this whole disaster of a day behind her. But her feet had other ideas, apparently, because she found herself changing course, heading toward the collaboration space. She knocked on the glass wall, even though the door was open. Noah looked up, and for a fraction of a second, Sloane saw something flash across his face. Surprise? Wariness? But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it, replaced by careful neutrality. "Do you have a minute?" Sloane asked. Noah glanced at his laptop, at the work spread across the table, and Sloane felt a flash of irritation. She was the CEO. She didn't ask for people's time. She took it. But that irritation was immediately followed by shame, because that attitude, that casual assumption of power, was part of the problem, wasn't it? "Sure," Noah said finally. He closed his laptop but didn't stand, didn't move, just waited for her to say whatever she'd come to say. Sloane stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Not for privacy, the walls were glass, but for the illusion of it, for the sense that this conversation was separate from the rest of the office, protected from gossip and speculation. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "for earlier, at the birthday thing. That was inappropriate." Noah was quiet for a moment, his hands resting flat on the table. He had good hands, Sloane noticed absently, capable hands, with long fingers and calluses on the fingertips that suggested he did something with them besides type. Guitar, maybe, or woodworking. "You didn't do anything wrong," Noah said finally. "It was just a joke." "It was a bad joke," Sloane corrected. "And I put you in an uncomfortable position. I'm sorry." Apology accepted. Noah's tone was polite, professional, completely closed off. This was him being courteous, going through the motions because she was his boss, and this was what the situation required, but there was no real forgiveness in it, no connection. He wanted her to leave. Sloane should have left. She'd apologized. The professional thing to do was accept his acceptance and move on. Instead, she found herself sitting down across from him, ignoring the way his eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "Why did you say yes?" The question was out before she could stop it, before she could recognize it as the boundary violation it obviously was. Noah's jaw tightened. "I told you. It seemed rude not to answer." "That's not an answer?" "With respect, I don't think I owe you an answer," Noah said, and there was a bite to his tone now, the first crack in the professional facade. "You made a joke. I played along. End of story." "You didn't play along," Sloane said. "That's the thing. You weren't joking." They sat there in silence, the air between them charged with something Sloane couldn't quite name. Outside the glass walls, people walked by without looking in, everyone carefully minding their own business in that way that meant they were absolutely going to gossip about this later. "Why do you care?" Noah asked finally.
and he sounded genuinely curious. "You apologized. I accepted. That should be enough. It should be enough." Sloane knew that, but there was something about the way he'd looked at her in that conference room, something about the careful dignity with which he'd walked out, that had gotten under her skin in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Because I humiliated you," Sloane said quietly. "And I don't actually know why. That bothers me." Noah studied her for a long moment, and Sloane had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed, of being seen in a way that she usually avoided. She spent so much energy controlling how people perceived her, crafting her image, managing her reputation, that being looked at directly, without the buffer of her CEO persona, felt almost physically uncomfortable. "You want to know why I said yes?" Noah said finally, not quite a question. "If you're willing to tell me." Noah leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because for about 5 seconds, I thought you were serious. And for those 5 seconds, I thought maybe—" He trailed off, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Like you said, it was a joke." "I'm sorry," Sloane said again, and this time she meant it in a different way. Not just sorry for the joke, but sorry for the 5 seconds of hope she'd apparently created and then destroyed. Sorry for not seeing him clearly enough to realize her throwaway comment might land like a bomb. "It's fine." Noah opened his laptop again, a clear dismissal. "Was there anything else?" There wasn't. There shouldn't be. Sloane stood, smoothing down her skirt with the kind of nervous gesture she usually suppressed. "No, that was all. Thank you for hearing me out." Noah nodded, already refocusing on his screen. Sloane walked out of the collaboration space and headed back to her office. But the conversation stayed with her like a bruise, tender and aching, and impossible to ignore. She didn't know Noah Lane, didn't know anything about him beyond his personnel file and his work product, but she'd heard him, and that mattered in a way she couldn't quite articulate. That night, alone in her too large apartment with its too expensive furniture and its too quiet rooms, Sloane found herself thinking about those 5 seconds. About what it meant that Noah had, however briefly, believed her. About what it meant that part of her wished she'd been serious too. The next morning, Sloane made it her business to learn about Noah Lane. Not in a creepy way, she told herself, just in a responsible CEO understanding her employees' way. She pulled his personnel file, started reading through his project history, talked to his manager about his performance. The picture that emerged was interesting. Noah had been with TechCore for 6 years. He'd started as a junior project coordinator and worked his way up through sheer competence and reliability. His performance reviews were consistently excellent, meeting deadlines, managing stakeholders, handling crisis situations with calm efficiency. Multiple managers had noted that he was the person they assigned to disaster projects, the ones that were already 3 months behind and bleeding resources, because Noah had an almost supernatural ability to salvage the unsalvageable. But what really caught Sloane's attention were the patterns in his work schedule. Noah arrived early, 6:30 most mornings, earlier than almost anyone except Sloane herself. But he also left precisely at 5:30, every single day, without exception. No late nights, no weekend work, no after-hours emails. It was so consistent it looked like he'd programmed an alarm. And yet his work was always done. Always on time, always high quality, always exceeding expectations. Sloane asked his manager about it during their weekly one-on-one. "Noah's probably our most reliable PM," David Hernandez said. David was head of the project management office, a calm, thoughtful man in his 50s who'd been with TechCore since before they'd gone public. "If I have a project that absolutely cannot fail, I give it to Noah." "He leaves at 5:30 every day," Sloane observed. 5:27, actually, David said, smiling slightly. "You could set your watch by it, but it's never been a problem. The man's efficient in a way that makes everyone else look like they're moving through molasses." "Why 5:30? David hesitated, and Sloane recognized the look, the careful consideration of how much to share about an employee's personal life, the weighing of privacy against context. "He has a daughter," David said finally, 4 years old. His wife died 2 years ago, cancer. Noah's father lives with them and handles most of the childcare, but Noah picks up his daughter from daycare every evening, non-negotiable. Sloane sat with that for a moment.
The personnel file hadn't mentioned any of this, but then why would it? Personal circumstances weren't part of the official record unless they affected performance. He never asked for accommodations, David continued, never requests special treatment. He just manages, does his job, does it exceptionally well, and leaves at 5:30 to be a father. I respect the hell out of it, honestly. So did Sloan. The discipline required to maintain those boundaries, to protect that time with his daughter while still delivering excellent work, spoke to a kind of strength she recognized because she saw the opposite all around her. People who let work consume everything, who stayed late not because they needed to, but because they didn't know how to leave, who measured their worth by how much of their lives they sacrificed to the company. Thanks, Sloan said. That's helpful context. David gave her a knowing look. Heard about the birthday incident? Of course you did, Sloan muttered. Is there anyone who hasn't heard about it? Probably not, David admitted, but for what it's worth, I don't think Noah's holding it against you. He's not that type. He'll move on. But moving on and forgetting were different things, Sloan thought. She'd move on too. She'd go back to being the CEO, and Noah would go back to being the reliable project manager, and the whole awkward incident would become just another story in the company's mythology. Except she kept thinking about it. About him. About those 5 seconds when he'd thought she was serious. 3 days after the birthday incident, Sloan saw Noah with his daughter. She was leaving late, 7:30, trying to clear out her inbox before the weekend, when she heard the voices in the lobby. Curious, she'd looked through the glass walls of her office and seen Noah standing near the security desk, holding hands with a small girl in a pink raincoat. Maisie, Sloan thought. His daughter was named Maisie. She'd learned that from his emergency contact form, which felt like a violation of privacy, even though it was technically accessible to her as CEO. They weren't supposed to be there. The building was mostly empty, just security and the handful of people who'd stayed late to finish projects or avoid going home to empty apartments. But Noah was there, and his daughter was there, and Sloan watched them with a fascination she couldn't quite justify. Noah was crouched down to Maisie's level, adjusting her raincoat hood with the kind of patient attention that spoke to practice and routine. Maisie was talking. Sloan couldn't hear the words, but she could see the animation in the little girl's face, could see the way Noah listened with complete focus, like nothing else in the world mattered except whatever story his 4-year-old daughter was telling him. Then Maisie did something that made Sloan's heart clench unexpectedly. She reached up and put both her small hands on either side of Noah's face, squishing his cheeks in that unselfconscious way that children do, and said something that made Noah smile. Not the careful professional smile Sloan had seen him use at work, but a real smile, unguarded and full of warmth. He loved her. That was obvious. But more than that, he was present with her in a way that Sloan recognized as rare. He wasn't checking his phone, wasn't mentally running through his work to-do list, wasn't thinking about anything except this moment with his daughter in a mostly empty office building at 7:30 on a Friday night. Sloan should have looked away, should have respected their privacy, gone back to her email, let them have their moment without an audience. Instead, she found herself walking to her office door, opening it, stepping out into the hallway. They noticed her immediately. Maisie's head swiveled toward the sound, her eyes wide with the fearless curiosity of young children. Noah straightened quickly, his expression shifting back to that professional neutrality Sloan was starting to recognize as his default setting with her. "Sloan," he said, and she couldn't tell if the formality was for his daughter's benefit or his own. "Sorry, we're not supposed to be here. My father had a medical issue. Nothing serious, but I had to bring Maisie with me while I grab some files I need for the weekend." "It's fine," Sloan said, walking toward them. She was acutely aware of her heels clicking on the marble floor, of the way Maisie was studying her with that disconcerting directness that children have. No rule against children in the building after hours. "Is there a rule during hours?" Maisie asked, and Sloan had to fight back a smile. "Not technically," Sloan said, crouching down to be at eye level with the little girl, the way Noah had been a moment ago. "But it's not usually a very fun place for kids. Lots of boring meetings and computers." "Daddy has a computer at home," Maisie informed her seriously. "Sometimes he lets me play the penguin game." "The penguin game sounds much better than what I do with computers," Sloan said gravely. Maisie considered this. "What do you do?" Mostly I read emails and try not to fall asleep in meetings. Maisie giggled, and the sound was so pure, so genuinely delighted that Sloane felt something in her chest loosen slightly. When was the last time she'd made someone laugh like that? Not the polite chuckles of business associates or the strategic laughter of networking events, but real, unguarded joy. "We should go," Noah said, his hand resting protectively on Maisie's shoulder. "Let you get back to your work." "Actually," Sloane said, surprising herself, "I was about to leave too. Long week." This was true, but it also wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that she'd been planning to stay for at least another hour, but suddenly that seemed less important than… what? Talking to Noah? Getting to know the man behind the careful professional facade? She didn't know. She just knew she wasn't ready for them to leave. "Maisie," Noah said gently, "can you sit on that bench for just a minute while I talk to Ms. Boz Mercer?" Maisie agreed with the easy compliance of a well-loved child, skipping over to the bench near the security desk and pulling a small stuffed elephant from her backpack. Noah waited until she was settled before turning back to Sloane. "About the other day?" he started. "We don't have to talk about it," Sloane interrupted. "I apologized. You accepted. It's done." "Is it?" Noah asked, and there was something in his tone that made Sloane pause. "Isn't it?" Noah was quiet for a moment, and Sloane had the sense he was choosing his words carefully, weighing each one before speaking. "People at work have been different since the birthday thing. They look at me differently." "They'll forget about it," Sloane said, but even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true. "Maybe." Noah glanced over at Maisie, who was making her stuffed elephant hop across the bench. "Or maybe they'll just add it to the list of reasons I'm different. The single dad. The guy who leaves at 5:30. The one who doesn't come to happy hours or play on the company softball team because he has responsibilities." There was no self-pity in his voice, just tired resignation, and Sloane realized with uncomfortable clarity that she'd been thinking about the birthday incident only in terms of how it affected her reputation, her relationships with employees, her ability to be seen as approachable. She hadn't considered how it affected Noah beyond the immediate embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I didn't think…" "No," Noah agreed quietly. "You didn't." The words should have stung, but they didn't. They just landed like truth, heavy and undeniable. "Daddy," Maisie called from the bench. "Can we go home now? I'm hungry." "Yeah, baby," Noah called back. "Just one more minute." He looked at Sloane again, and she saw fatigue in his eyes. Not just the fatigue of a long week, but something deeper. The fatigue of someone carrying more weight than should be possible for one person. "I should go," he said. "My father's probably worried." "Of course." Sloane stepped back, creating space for them to leave. "Have a good weekend." Noah nodded, already turning toward Maisie, already shifting back into father mode. But Sloane heard herself speak again before she could stop herself. "Noah." He paused, looked back. "If you ever need flexibility with your schedule or anything, just ask. We can work something out." Something flickered across Noah's face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "I'm fine," he said. "But thank you." Then he collected Maisie, her small hand disappearing into his larger one, and they walked out of the building together. Sloane watched them go, watched the way Maisie skipped beside her father, chattering about something Sloane couldn't hear. Watched the way Noah listened with that same complete attention he'd given her earlier. And she wondered what it would be like to be loved like that. To be someone's entire world, someone's reason for leaving work at 5:30 every single day, no matter what fires were burning or deadlines were looming. She'd chosen ambition over that possibility years ago, had prioritized her career, her goals, her rise up the corporate ladder. And she told herself it was worth it, that she'd made the right choice, that she didn't need the complications of relationships or families. But watching Noah and Maisie disappear into the rainy evening, Sloane felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt lonely. The weekend passed in the way weekends did when you had no one to share them with. Too long and too short simultaneously, filled with errands and emails and the low-grade anxiety that came from being untethered from the structure of work. Sloane went to the gym, meal prepped for the week, called her mother in Arizona, and had the same conversation they always had about when Sloane was going to settle down and give her grandchildren. "I'm 34, Mom," Sloane had said, pacing her apartment with her phone pressed to her ear. "I have time." "Your cousin Jennifer just had her third," her mother had replied, because apparently this was a competition, "and she's younger than you." "Good for Jennifer. I'm just saying, sweetheart, you spend so much time at that office. Life is more than work." "I know that," Sloane had said, even though she wasn't sure she did. Work was the thing she understood, the place where effort translated directly into results. Personal life was messy and unpredictable and full of variables she couldn't control, but after she hung up, she'd found herself thinking about Noah again, about the way he balanced work and fatherhood, about the hard boundaries he maintained, about how he'd built a life that included both success and love. Or maybe not love. His wife was dead. That was the reality under everything else. He was a widower raising a daughter alone, doing the best he could with circumstances that must have been devastating. Sloane didn't know how to hold that knowledge. It felt too intimate, too personal, like information she shouldn't have. But she couldn't unknow it, couldn't stop thinking about what it must be like to lose your partner and still have to show up every day, still have to be present for your child, still have to go to work and do your job and pretend like your world hadn't ended. On Sunday evening, she drafted an email to Noah 3 times before deleting it. What would she even say? "Thanks for letting me meet your daughter in the lobby. Sorry for making you an object of office gossip. I keep thinking about you and I don't know why." All terrible options. So she deleted the drafts, closed her laptop, and told herself she'd forget about the whole thing by Monday morning. But Monday morning came, and she hadn't forgotten anything. Monday brought rain, the kind of steady, persistent Seattle rain that turned the city gray and made everyone move a little slower, a little more carefully. Sloane arrived at 6:15, earlier than usual, as if getting a head start on the day might somehow help her outrun the thoughts that had kept her awake half the night. It didn't work. By 9 o'clock, she'd caught herself staring out her office window 3 times, looking for Noah's car in the parking lot below, like some kind of stalker. This was ridiculous. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, not a teenager with a crush. Except it wasn't a crush. It was something else. Concern, maybe, or curiosity, or guilt that had calcified into something more complicated. She'd hurt him, and she wanted to make it right. And somewhere along the way that had transformed into wanting to know him, to understand the man who could say, "What if I say yes?" with such quiet certainty, and then walk away with such dignity. "You're doing it again," Priya said from the doorway, and Sloane nearly jumped. "Doing what?" "That thing where you stare into space and forget you have a 10 o'clock with the VP of sales." Priya walked in and set a fresh coffee on Sloane's desk, the good kind from the cafe down the street, not the office sludge. "What's going on? You've been weird all morning." "I'm not weird." "You reorganized your pen cup twice. You're weird." Priya sat down in one of the chairs across from Sloane's desk, crossing her legs and fixing Sloane with the kind of look that suggested she wasn't leaving until she got answers. "Talk." Sloane sighed. There were days when having an assistant who actually cared about her well-being was inconvenient. "It's nothing, just distracted." "By Noah Lane?" Sloane's head snapped up. "What? No, why would you—" "Because you've checked his calendar 4 times this morning," Priya said calmly. "Which I know because I get notifications when you access other people's schedules, and because you asked David Hernandez about him during your one-on-one last week, and because everyone saw you talking to him in the lobby Friday night." "I was being friendly," Sloane said, but it sounded defensive even to her own ears. "You're never friendly," Priya replied, not unkindly. "You're professional, you're fair, you're occasionally charming when required, but friendly, that's not really your thing." Sloane wanted to argue, but Priya was right. She'd cultivated professional distance deliberately, had built walls around herself that made her effective but also isolated. It was easier that way, safer. "I embarrassed him," Sloane said finally, "at the birthday thing, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix it." "You already apologized." "I know, but—" Sloane broke off, frustrated. How could she explain the feeling that an apology wasn't enough? That she'd exposed something in that moment that went deeper than simple embarrassment? Priya studied her for a long moment. "You like him." "I don't even know him." "But you want to."
Priya said gently. And that scares you. Yes, Sloane thought, but didn't say. Because admitting it would make it real, would mean acknowledging that the careful life she'd built, successful, controlled, predictable, had cracks in it, had spaces that success couldn't fill. 10 o'clock meeting, Sloane said instead, picking up her coffee like it was armor. I should prep. Priya stood, but she paused at the door. For what it's worth, Noah's a good guy. If you're going to break your no personal connections rule for anyone, he's not a bad choice. I don't have a rule. You have 17 rules, Priya said. And don't get involved with employees is number 3, right after always be early and never show uncertainty. She left before Sloane could respond, which was probably wise because Sloane had no idea what she would have said anyway. The morning crawled by in a series of meetings that required just enough attention to be exhausting, but not enough to distract Sloane from her thoughts. By 11:30, she'd made a decision. Not a well-thought-out decision, not a strategic one, but a decision nonetheless. She was going to talk to Noah. Properly. Not an apology, not a professional check-in, but an actual conversation. She was going to figure out why he'd said what he'd said, why those 5 seconds had mattered so much, why she couldn't stop thinking about a man she barely knew. The rationalization came easily. She needed to understand her employees, needed to build relationships with key team members, needed to ensure the work environment was healthy and productive. All true. All valid business reasons for seeking out a project manager who'd done nothing but his job excellently for 6 years. None of them were the real reason, but Sloane was well practiced at lying to herself. She found Noah in his usual spot, one of the collaboration spaces on the 3rd floor surrounded by project timelines and status reports. He looked tired, she thought. There were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well, and his coffee cup had the desperate, half-empty look of something that had been refilled multiple times. Sloane knocked on the glass wall. Noah looked up, and she saw the surprise on his face before he smoothed it away into professional neutrality. Do you have a minute? Sloane asked, and then realized with a jolt that this was exactly how she'd started their last private conversation. Great. Really establishing a new pattern here. Sure, Noah said, closing his laptop. What do you need? What did she need? Sloane stepped into the room, very aware that they were visible to anyone who walked by, that this would probably generate more gossip, that she was possibly making everything worse. I wanted to ask if you'd have coffee with me, Sloane said, and watched Noah's eyebrows rise. Not here. The place down the street. Tomorrow morning, maybe. Before work? Noah was quiet for a long moment, and Sloane could see him calculating, trying to figure out what this was really about. Is this work-related? No, Sloane said honestly. It's not. Then why? Because I'd like to know you better, Sloane said. And there it was, the truth, unvarnished and slightly terrifying. And I think maybe you'd like to know me better too. Or if I'm completely wrong about that, you can tell me and I'll leave you alone. She held her breath. This was so far outside her comfort zone, she couldn't even see the comfort zone anymore. She was the CEO. She didn't ask people to coffee. She didn't express interest in knowing them better. She maintained professional boundaries and kept her personal life separate and controlled every variable she could. But Noah made her want to break those rules. Tomorrow's hard, Noah said slowly. I have to get Maisie ready and drop her at daycare. But Wednesday? 7 o'clock? Relief flooded through Sloane so intensely she almost laughed. Wednesday works. 7 o'clock. The cafe on Pine Street? Perfect. Noah nodded, and for the first time since the birthday incident, he gave her something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't not a smile either. Something tentative and real and hopeful. Sloane walked back to her office feeling lighter than she had in days, which was ridiculous because all she'd done was arrange a coffee meeting with an employee. Nothing had changed. Nothing had happened. Except everything had changed, and they both knew it. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of autumn day where you could see your breath, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that made you remember why people lived in the Pacific Northwest despite the rain. Sloane woke up at 5:30, went to the gym, came home and changed 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that looked casual but not too casual, professional but not intimidating. She was being ridiculous. This was coffee.
People had coffee all the time. It meant nothing. Except she couldn't remember the last time she'd been nervous about a coffee meeting. The cafe on Pine Street was one of those carefully curated Seattle institutions. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, chalkboard menu listing drinks with names like Midnight Sage Latte that suggested someone had taken mixology classes and decided to apply them to coffee. Sloane arrived at 6:55 and immediately regretted being early because now she had to choose a table, which felt loaded with meaning. Window seat too exposed, back corner too intimate, bar seats too casual. She settled on a table in the middle, ordered a regular coffee because she didn't trust her ability to pronounce Midnight Sage Latte without sounding pretentious, and tried to look like someone who regularly met employees for casual morning coffee and wasn't internally panicking about it. Noah arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, because of course he did. He was wearing jeans and a dark blue Henley, and Sloane realized with a start that she'd never seen him in anything but business casual. He looked different like this, younger, less guarded, more real. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Sorry, parking was brutal." "You're right on time," Sloane said. "I was early." "You're always early," Noah observed. "I've noticed your car in the lot when I arrive most mornings." So he'd noticed her too. Sloane didn't know what to do with that information. They ordered. Noah got something complicated with oat milk and vanilla that the barista didn't even blink at. And then they were alone with the awkward silence that follows the logistical necessities of two people sitting down together. "So," Noah said finally, "why am I here?" Direct. Sloane appreciated that. She was tired of dancing around things. "Because I embarrassed you, and I've been trying to figure out why it bothered me so much," Sloane said. "And I realized it's because I don't know anything about you. 6 years you've been at TechCore, excellent performance reviews, critical to half our biggest projects, and I couldn't tell you the first thing about who you actually are." "Most CEOs can't," Noah pointed out. "That's not exactly unusual." "Maybe not, but it bothers me anyway." Sloane wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep through. "Tell me about Maisie." Noah's expression shifted immediately, the walls coming down, the professional mask slipping away to reveal something softer underneath. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Sloane said honestly. "What's she like? What does she love? What kind of father are you?" Noah laughed, and it was the first real laugh Sloane had heard from him, low and genuine and tinged with exhaustion. "I'm a tired father. That's the main kind." He paused, considering. "Maisie's 4. She's obsessed with elephants, hence the stuffed one you saw Friday. She has 17 of them now. She's smart, scarily smart, asks questions I have no idea how to answer. Why is the sky blue? Where do thoughts come from? Why can't we keep the moon?" "Can't keep the moon?" "She saw the moon during the day once and wanted to take it home," Noah explained, and Sloane could hear the love in his voice, the tenderness mixed with amusement. "I had to explain that the moon isn't ours to keep. She was devastated." "How do you do it?" Sloane asked quietly. "The job, the parenting, everything, and make it look so easy." "It's not easy," Noah said flatly. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but I don't have a choice. Maisie needs me, so I show up." "Your wife," Sloane started carefully, then stopped. "I'm sorry. That's too personal." "Her name was Claire," Noah said, and his voice had gone careful, like he was handling something fragile. "We met in college. She was brilliant. Environmental engineer, wanted to save the world one watershed at a time. She died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Very aggressive." "I'm so sorry," Sloane said, and the words felt inadequate, too small for the size of that loss. "Maisie was 2 when Claire died," Noah continued, looking down at his coffee. "Old enough to know something was wrong, too young to understand what death meant. She still asks about her sometimes. When is Mommy coming home? Like Claire's just away on a trip and might walk through the door any minute." Sloane felt something crack in her chest, sympathy and admiration and a fierce protectiveness for this man and his daughter who'd survived something she couldn't imagine surviving. "What do you tell her?" Sloane asked. "The truth. That Mommy loved her very much, and she's not coming back. But that doesn't mean she's gone. She's in the photos, in the stories, in the way Maisie scrunches her nose when she laughs, just like Claire used to." Noah looked up, met Sloane's eyes. "It's not enough. but it's what I have. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe noise washing around them, espresso machines hissing, conversations murmuring, the clink of cups and spoons, and the normal soundtrack of morning in a city full of people starting their days. "Why did you say yes?" Sloane asked again, the question that had been haunting her for over a week. "At the birthday thing. Why did you answer like that?" Noah was quiet for so long Sloane thought he might not answer. Then he sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and looked at her with an expression that was equal parts resignation and honesty. "Because, for 5 seconds, the idea that someone like you might want to marry me felt like the best thing I'd heard in 2 years," he said simply. "And then I remembered it was a joke, and that felt about right. Because that's what my life is now, moments where I forget how much I've lost, followed by reality crashing back in." Sloane's throat felt tight. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "I know," Noah said. You were trying to be relatable, to show everyone you're human. Mission accomplished." "That's not fair, isn't it?" Noah leaned back in his chair, and there was no anger in his voice, just tired honesty. "You're the CEO, Sloane. You're brilliant and powerful and terrifying, and you walk into rooms and everyone reorganizes themselves around you. Do you have any idea what that's like for the rest of us? Watching you exist in this different atmosphere where the rules don't apply the same way?" "That's not," Sloane started, then stopped because she couldn't finish the sentence, because he was right. She did exist in a different atmosphere, had made deliberate choices to put herself there, to separate herself from the normal concerns and complications of other people's lives. "I'm not blaming you," Noah said more gently. "You've earned everything you have. But when you made that joke, for 5 seconds I forgot about the distance between us. Forgot that you're my boss, and I'm just a project manager with a kid and a dead wife. Forgot that someone like you doesn't end up with someone like me. And it felt possible. That's why I answered the way I did." "Someone like you," Sloane repeated. "What does that mean?" "Someone carrying too much. Someone who leaves at 5:30 because he doesn't have a choice. Someone whose entire life is about survival, not ambition." Noah met her eyes steadily. "We're from different worlds, Sloane. You must see that." "I see a man who's done something extraordinary," Sloane said quietly. "Kept working, kept going, kept being an exceptional father and employee while dealing with grief that would have destroyed most people. That's not less than what I've done. It might be more." Noah looked at her for a long moment, and Sloane saw surprise there, and something else, something that looked like hope struggling against better judgment. "Why did you really ask me to coffee?" he asked. "Because I wanted to know you," Sloane said. "And because when I watched you with Maisie on Friday night, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time. Someone who's built a life that matters. Not just success, not just accomplishments, but something real." "You can have that too," Noah said. "Can I?" Sloane heard the vulnerability in her own voice and hated it, but she couldn't take it back. "I'm 34 years old. I'm the CEO of a company I've given everything to. I go home to an empty apartment every night. My mother calls once a week to remind me my biological clock is ticking. And I tell myself I chose this, that I'm happy, that this is what I wanted." "But you're not happy," Noah said, not quite a question. "I don't know," Sloane admitted. "I don't think I've let myself ask that question in years." The barista called out someone's order, a caramel macchiato for Jennifer, and they both flinched at the interruption, the reminder that they were having this conversation in public, that the real world was continuing around them. "I should go," Noah said, checking his watch. "Need to get to the office." "Right. Of course." Sloane stood when he did, fumbling with her coffee cup like she'd forgotten how to hold basic objects. "Thank you for talking to me, for being honest." "Sloane," Noah said, and she looked up. "I'm not sorry I said yes that day. Even if it was just for 5 seconds, even if it hurt afterward. I'm not sorry." He left before she could respond, weaving through the morning crowd toward the door. Sloane sat back down heavily, her coffee gone cold, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what had just happened, whether she'd made things better or worse, whether this was the beginning of something or just another complicated moment in an increasingly complicated situation. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wanted more mornings like this, more conversations where the walls came down and the truth came out, more moments where Noah looked at her like she was a person, not a position. She wanted him. Not in some vague, abstract way, but specifically. She wanted his steadiness, his strength, his capacity for love that hadn't been destroyed by loss. She wanted to be someone who mattered to him, someone he thought about, someone who occupied space in his carefully ordered life. It was the worst possible idea. He was her employee. He was a widower with a 4-year-old daughter. He deserved stability and simplicity, not the complications of dating his boss. She should walk away now, should restore professional boundaries before anyone got hurt. But Sloane had spent her entire life making the smart choice, the strategic choice, the choice that advanced her career and protected her position. For once, she wanted to make the choice that felt right, even if it was completely wrong. The weeks that followed developed a pattern so natural it felt almost inevitable. Coffee on Wednesday mornings became a standing appointment, though neither of them acknowledged it as such. They'd meet at the cafe at 7, talk for 45 minutes about everything and nothing. Maisie's latest fixation, rocks currently, which she was collecting in her pockets until Noah had to start checking her clothes before laundry. Sloane's ongoing battles with the board over budget allocation, the small absurdities of corporate life that only made sense when shared with someone who understood. Then coffee stretched into lunch. Noah had mentioned needing to review project specifications for a critical client deadline, and Sloane had suggested they do it over food because she was skipping lunch too often anyway. They'd gone to a sandwich place near the office, ostensibly to discuss work, but it ended up talking about music instead. Noah played guitar, used to play in a band in college, before real life intervened, and Sloane admitted she'd taken piano lessons for 10 years as a child and remembered exactly none of it. "How do you forget 10 years of piano?" Noah had asked, genuinely baffled. "By not practicing and having a mother who cared more about the appearance of culture than actual musical ability," Sloane had replied. And Noah had laughed that real laugh again, the one she'd started to crave. Lunches became regular too, twice a week, sometimes 3 times when their schedules aligned. Always with the excuse of work, always with project updates or strategic discussions that could have been handled via email but somehow required in-person conversation. The office noticed. Of course they noticed. Sloane heard the whispers, saw the speculative looks, intercepted the gossip that Priya reported back with increasing concern. "People are talking," Priya had said one afternoon, hovering in Sloane's doorway with that expression that meant she was about to say something Sloane didn't want to hear. "About you and Noah." "There's nothing to talk about," Sloane had replied, not looking up from her computer. "We have lunch sometimes. It's professional development." "Right, professional development." Priya's tone had been so carefully neutral, it was basically an accusation. "Is that what we're calling it?" "What would you call it?" "I'd call it you finally acting like a human being with feelings," Priya had said, "which is great, except he's your employee. And this company has policies about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, and you're smart enough to know this could blow up in both your faces." She'd been right, of course. Priya was always right about these things. But Sloane had ignored the warning because she was already in too deep to turn back, already counting the hours between their lunches, already looking for excuses to walk past the 3rd floor where Noah worked. It was ridiculous. She was ridiculous. And she didn't care. Noah's father had a doctor's appointment one Thursday afternoon, and Noah had mentioned offhandedly that he'd need to bring Maisie to the office for a few hours because the daycare couldn't accommodate the schedule change. Sloane had suggested he work from her office. More space, quieter, and she had a sofa where Maisie could play or nap. "Are you sure?" Noah had asked, and Sloane had heard the hesitation in his voice, the awareness that this was crossing yet another line. "I'm sure," Sloane had said. So that Thursday, Noah and Maisie had appeared at her office door at 2 o'clock. Maisie had been clutching her stuffed elephant and regarding Sloane's office with wide-eyed fascination. The big windows, the expensive furniture, the view of the city spread out below. "You can see everything from here," Maisie had breathed. "Pretty cool, right?" Sloane had said, crouching down to Maisie's level. "Want to see the best part?" She'd shown Maisie the telescope she kept by the window, technically purchased for scanning the competitive landscape, but never actually used. Maisie had been delighted, spotting boats in the Sound, clouds that looked like animals, birds perched on neighboring buildings. Noah had worked at the conference table in Sloane's office, and Sloane had tried to focus on her own work, but she kept getting distracted by the domestic scene playing out in her usually pristine space. Maisie coloring at the coffee table, Noah occasionally pausing to answer a question or help find a different crayon, the soft murmur of their voices creating a soundtrack Sloane hadn't realized her office was missing. At one point, Maisie had wandered over to Sloane's desk with a drawing, a stick figure labeled Sloane, close enough, standing next to a very tall building. "That's you at work," Maisie had explained seriously. "You look happy." "Do I?" Sloane had asked, studying the crayon smile on the stick figure's face. "Uh-huh. Because you're with Daddy and me." The simplicity of it had hit Sloane like a physical blow. In Maisie's world, happiness was that straightforward, being with people you cared about, in places that felt safe. When had Sloane's world become so complicated that she'd forgotten that basic truth? "Thank you," Sloane had said softly. "This is beautiful. Can I keep it?" Maisie had nodded solemnly, and Sloane had pinned the drawing to her bulletin board, right next to quarterly projections and strategic plans and all the other things that supposedly mattered. When Noah and Maisie had left that evening, 5:27 on the dot, Sloane's office had felt empty in a way it never had before. She'd stood at the window, watching them walk to their car in the parking lot below, watching Noah strap Maisie into her car seat with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times, watching them drive away. Her phone had buzzed. A text from Noah. "Thanks for today. Maisie hasn't stopped talking about your telescope." Sloane had typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "She's welcome back any time. Both of you are." The response had come quickly. "Careful what you offer. She'll take you up on it." "Good," Sloane had typed, and meant it. But that night, alone in her apartment with takeout she was too distracted to eat, Sloane had forced herself to confront what was happening. She was falling for Noah Lane. Not in some casual, this-might-be-fun way, but seriously. She thought about him constantly. She rearranged her schedule to accommodate their lunches. She'd let his daughter draw pictures in her office, and had felt genuine joy watching them together. This was dangerous. This was the kind of thing that ended careers and created hostile work environments and hurt people. She should stop, should restore boundaries, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. But the next morning, when Noah had texted asking if she wanted to grab coffee before work, Sloane had typed yes without hesitation. Because the truth was, she didn't want to stop. Didn't want to go back to the careful, controlled, lonely life she'd built. Didn't want to lose the feeling she got when Noah smiled at her like she was someone worth knowing, not just someone worth working for. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, possibly career-ending trouble. And the terrifying part was that she didn't care enough to walk away. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of Gavin Crow standing in Sloane's doorway with a manila folder and an expression that made her instinctively straighten in her chair. Gavin was Finance's senior director, a man in his late 40s who'd been passed over for CFO twice and seemed to wear his disappointment like a second skin. He was competent enough, good with numbers and better at politics, the kind of employee who knew exactly how much effort to expend to look valuable without actually being indispensable. Sloane had never particularly liked him, but she'd never had a concrete reason to distrust him either, until now. Something about the way he was looking at her, pleased and concerned in equal measure, like he was about to deliver bad news he'd been looking forward to sharing, set off every alarm bell she'd developed in 15 years of corporate survival. "Gavin," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "what can I do for you?" "I'm afraid we have a problem," Gavin said, closing the door behind him without asking permission. Another red flag. "A serious one. Involves a potential breach of confidential information." Sloane's stomach tightened. "Sit down. Tell me what happened." Gavin settled into the chair across from her desk with the careful precision of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. He opened the manila folder and slid several printed documents across her desk. "These are access logs from our secure file server. Specifically, the folder containing details about the Meridian merger." The Meridian merger was TechCore's worst-kept secret, an acquisition they'd been negotiating for 6 months that would essentially double their market share in cloud infrastructure. It was sensitive enough that access to the files was restricted to C-suite executives, board members, and exactly 3 lawyers. Everyone else was supposed to remain completely in the dark until the deal was finalized. "What about them?" Sloan asked, though she was already scanning the logs, already seeing the problem before Gavin pointed it out. "Notice anything unusual?" Gavin asked, and there was something in his tone, satisfaction, maybe, or vindication, that made Sloane's skin crawl. There, highlighted in yellow on the 3rd page, was a username she recognized immediately. N. Lane. Noah Lane. The timestamp showed he'd accessed the merger folder 4 days ago, Thursday evening at 6:47 p.m., and had been in the files for approximately 18 minutes. "This has to be a mistake," Sloan said immediately. "Noah doesn't have access to these files. The permissions wouldn't allow it." "That's what I thought too," Gavin said, and now he wasn't even trying to hide his pleasure. "But I checked with IT. The permissions were modified last Tuesday. Someone with admin access added Noah Lane to the authorized users list." "Who modified the permissions?" "That's the interesting part," Gavin said, leaning forward like he was sharing a particularly juicy piece of gossip. "The modification came from an account with C-suite privileges. Your account, specifically." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "My account? That's impossible. I never authorized Noah to access those files. I wouldn't even know how to modify server permissions. That's its job." "And yet the logs show your credentials were used to make the change," Gavin said. He slid another document across the desk, this one showing the permission modification request, time-stamped last Tuesday at 7:23 a.m., submitted under Sloane's account. "Either you gave him access or someone with your password did." "I didn't give him access," Sloane said firmly, but her mind was racing. Last Tuesday morning, she'd been in early, as always, but she'd left her computer unlocked when she'd gone to grab coffee from the break room. She'd been gone maybe 5 minutes, 10 at most. Could someone have accessed her computer in that window? But why would they? Unless this was a setup. Unless someone was deliberately trying to make it look like Noah had stolen confidential information and trying to implicate Sloane in the process. What was Noah doing in those files, Sloane asked, trying to think strategically, to stay ahead of wherever this was going. "That's what concerns me," Gavin said. "The Meridian merger is extremely sensitive. If details leak before we're ready to announce, it could tank the deal, cost us hundreds of millions, possibly trigger SEC investigations." And Noah accessed very specific files: the financial projections, the integration timeline, the executive compensation structure. Exactly the information that would be most valuable to competitors or short sellers. "You're suggesting Noah is leaking information?" Sloane heard the defensive edge in her voice and tried to moderate it. She needed to sound objective, like a CEO evaluating a potential security breach, not like someone personally invested in Noah's innocence. "Based on what evidence? Access logs show he opened files. That doesn't prove he did anything with the information." "There's more," Gavin said, and pulled out his phone. He opened an email and turned it toward Sloane. "This arrived in my inbox this morning. Anonymous sender, untraceable address." Sloane read the email with growing dread. It was brief, just a few sentences suggesting that TechCore should investigate unusual trading activity in their stock over the past week, that someone with inside information might be positioning themselves to profit from the merger announcement, that perhaps leadership should look at employees with access to sensitive files. "This could be from anyone," Sloane said. "A disgruntled employee, a competitor trying to cause problems, someone with a grudge. It's not evidence." "I checked with our stock monitoring service," Gavin said. "There's been unusual trading activity. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger automatic SEC alerts, but definitely abnormal. Small purchases by several different entities, all in the past week, all timed in a way that suggests advanced knowledge." "And you think Noah is behind this?" Sloane couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. "Noah, who leaves every day at 5:30 to pick up his daughter, who's never shown the slightest interest in anything beyond doing his job well? You think he's suddenly running an insider trading scheme?" "I think someone accessed files they shouldn't have," Gavin said carefully. "I think that someone used credentials that trace back to you, which puts you in a very difficult position. And I think that if we don't investigate this properly, and it turns out there was a breach, The board will want to know why the CEO ignored red flags. He was right, and Sloan hated that he was right. This was exactly the kind of thing that ended careers. Not the actual crime, if there even was one, but the appearance of impropriety, the suggestion that leadership had failed to protect company interests. If she swept this under the rug, and it later emerged that there had been a real breach, she'd be finished. But if she pursued this publicly, if she accused Noah based on circumstantial evidence, she'd destroy him. Even if he was eventually cleared, the stain of suspicion would follow him forever. No one would trust him with sensitive information again. He'd be radioactive. "I want to talk to Noah first," Sloan said. "Before this goes any further, I want to hear his side." "With respect, that's not advisable," Gavin said. "If he is involved in something inappropriate, giving him advance warning could allow him to cover his tracks, delete evidence, coordinate with accomplices. The proper procedure is to suspend his access immediately, conduct a full investigation, and only interview him once we have all the facts." "He's my employee," Sloan said, her voice harder than she intended. "I'm not suspending him based on access logs in an anonymous email. I'll talk to him, and then I'll decide how to proceed." Gavin's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for Sloan to see that she'd made a mistake. By defending Noah, by resisting the immediate suspension Gavin was recommending, she'd revealed exactly how invested she was. And Gavin had noticed. "Of course," Gavin said smoothly, standing and collecting his documents. "You're the CEO. It's your call. I just hope you're considering how this looks, the CEO defending an employee she's been spending a lot of time with lately. People talk, Sloan. You know they do." The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Gavin wasn't just accusing Noah of stealing information. He was suggesting that Sloan's judgment was compromised, that her relationship with Noah, whatever that relationship was, had made her unable to act objectively. And the worst part was that he might be right. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Sloan said, her voice cold enough to freeze. "I'll handle it from here. You can go." Gavin left, and Sloan sat alone with the access logs spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. She wanted to believe Noah was innocent, wanted to trust that there was some reasonable explanation for why his username appeared in files he shouldn't have been able to access, but wanting something didn't make it true. She called Priya. "I need to see Noah Lane, now, my office." "Everything okay?" Priya asked, hearing something in Sloan's voice. "No," Sloan said honestly. "Everything is very much not okay." Noah arrived 10 minutes later, and Sloan's heart clenched at the sight of him. Relaxed, unsuspecting, smiling slightly like he thought this might be a pleasant surprise. He had no idea what was coming. "Hey," he said, closing the door behind him. "Priya said you wanted to see me. Is this about the Anderson Project timeline? Because I think I can—" "Sit down, Noah," Sloan interrupted and watched his expression shift as he registered her tone. "What's wrong?" he asked, but he sat down, his body language immediately defensive. Sloan slid the access logs across her desk. "I need you to explain these." Noah picked up the documents, his eyes scanning the highlighted sections. She watched his face closely, looking for guilt or recognition or panic, but all she saw was confusion. "I don't understand," Noah said slowly. "These show my username in the Meridian merger files, but I've never accessed those files. I don't even have permission to—" He stopped, realization dawning. "Someone thinks I stole confidential information." "Did you?" Sloan asked, hating herself for asking but needing to hear him say it. Noah's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that was almost painful. "No, absolutely not. I didn't access these files, and I have no idea how my username ended up in the logs." "The logs don't lie," Sloan said, playing devil's advocate even though everything in her wanted to believe him. "Your credentials accessed those files Thursday night at 6:47 p.m. Where were you at that time?" "Home," Noah said immediately. "With Maisie. My father was there too. We had dinner, gave Maisie a bath. I read her 3 books about elephants because she's decided she wants to be a zoologist when she grows up. I can give you the exact timeline of my evening if you need it." "Can anyone verify you were home, aside from your father and your 4-year-old daughter?" Noah's jaw tightened. "No." I wasn't planning on needing an alibi for my evening at home with my child. Sloane rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. Noah, I want to believe you, but someone accessed those files using your credentials, and I need to figure out who and why. You want to believe me, Noah repeated, his voice flat, but you're not sure you do. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Noah said. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. This is about more than access logs, isn't it? Someone's coming after me, and you're trying to decide if I'm guilty before you even hear my defense. That's not fair, Sloane said, but even as she said it, she wondered if he was right. Gavin had planted the seed of doubt, and now it was growing, choking out her certainty like weeds in a garden. What's not fair is being accused of something I didn't do by the person I thought. Noah stopped abruptly, shook his head. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Say it, Sloane said. The person you thought what? Noah turned to face her, and the pain in his expression made Sloane want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. The person I thought cared about me, about who I actually am, not just what the evidence suggests. But maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe I've been wrong about a lot of things. Noah, what happens now? Noah interrupted. Do you suspend me? Launch an investigation? Call security to escort me out of the building? I don't know yet, Sloane admitted. I need to figure out what actually happened. While assuming I might be guilty. While trying to protect both you and this company, Sloane corrected, her voice rising despite her attempt to stay calm. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to believe you stole confidential information? But I'm the CEO, Noah. I have responsibilities beyond my personal feelings. There it is, Noah said quietly. Your personal feelings. What are those exactly? Because from where I'm standing, it's getting really hard to tell. The question hung between them like a challenge, and Sloane realized with sinking certainty that she'd reached a crossroads. She could give him the safe answer, the professional one, maintain the boundaries that were supposed to exist between CEO and employee, or she could tell him the truth and risk everything. I care about you, Sloane said, the words coming out raw and unpolished. More than I should, more than is probably wise, definitely more than is professional. I think about you constantly. I rearrange my schedule just to have coffee with you. I let your daughter draw pictures in my office because seeing you two together makes me feel something I haven't felt in years. So yes, Noah, I have personal feelings, and they're complicated and probably inappropriate, and they're making this situation infinitely harder than it already is. Noah stared at her, and Sloane couldn't read his expression. Surprise, maybe, or anger, or something else entirely. But despite all of that, Sloane continued, forcing herself to finish, I still have to do my job. And my job right now is figuring out how your username ended up in files you shouldn't have been able to access. Because if I don't, and this becomes a bigger scandal, it won't just be your career on the line. It'll be mine too, and possibly the company's. The silence that followed felt like it might shatter something. Noah walked back to the desk, placed the access logs down carefully, and looked at Sloane with an expression she couldn't decipher. I didn't do this, he said quietly. I don't know who did or why they're trying to make it look like I did, but I am not a thief and I am not a liar. And if you can't see that, if you need an investigation to tell you who I am, then maybe we don't know each other as well as I thought. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I care about you too. Probably more than I should, definitely more than is wise. But I'm not going to stand here and defend myself to someone who's already decided I might be guilty. I haven't decided anything, Sloane protested. Haven't you? Noah opened the door. Let me know when the investigation starts. I'll make sure to have my lawyer ready. He left, and Sloane stood frozen in her office, the access log still spread across her desk, the drawing Maisie had made still pinned to her bulletin board, and the feeling that she'd just made a catastrophic mistake settling in her stomach like lead. She'd meant to protect him, to give him a chance to explain, to find the truth before anyone else got involved. But instead she'd hurt him, had made him feel like she doubted him, had chosen her job over trusting him, and the worst part was that she couldn't even say he was wrong. The day deteriorated from there. Sloane spent 2 hours with IT trying to trace how Noah's credentials had been used, but the trail was clean, too clean actually, which made her more suspicious that this was a setup. Someone with decent technical skills could have stolen Noah's password, accessed the files remotely, covered their tracks. But proving that would take time, and time was something she didn't have. Because by 3 o'clock, word had spread. Sloan didn't know how. Gavin, probably, or maybe just the office gossip network that functioned with the efficiency of an intelligence agency. But suddenly everyone seemed to know that Noah Lane was under investigation for stealing confidential information. The whispers started immediately. The speculative looks. The way people stopped talking when Noah walked by. The careful distance his colleagues suddenly maintained. Sloan watched it happen through her office window, watched Noah become radioactive in real time, and hated herself for not being able to stop it. At 4:30, she got a call from the board chair. "Sloan," Richard Kaufman said, his voice carrying that particular blend of concern and authority that made Sloan's shoulders tense automatically. "I heard we might have a security breach. Tell me it's not as bad as I'm hearing." "It's complicated," Sloan said carefully. "We're investigating possible unauthorized access to sensitive merger documents. I don't want to speculate until we have all the facts. Gavin seems to think it's one of your project managers. Noah Lane?" Of course Gavin had already called the board. Of course he had. The access logs show Noah's credentials were used, but that doesn't necessarily mean Noah was the one who used them. We're exploring all possibilities. "Including the possibility that he's guilty?" "Including all possibilities," Sloan repeated. "Good," Richard said. "Because if this leaks, if the merger falls apart because we couldn't keep our own house secure, the board will want answers. And they'll want to know why the CEO didn't act decisively when presented with evidence of wrongdoing." The implicit threat was clear. Handle this correctly or face consequences. Sloan had spent 6 months earning the board's trust, proving she deserved the CEO position despite her age and relative inexperience. One misstep, one scandal, one hint that she'd let personal feelings compromise her judgment, and they'd remove her so fast her head would spin. "I understand," Sloan said. "I'll keep you updated." She hung up and stared at her computer screen, at the email from HR outlining the formal investigation procedures, at the carefully worded memo she needed to send to department heads about the security review they were conducting. Everything was falling apart, and she had no idea how to stop it. At 5:15, Noah walked past her office. Sloan saw him through the glass walls, saw the rigid set of his shoulders, the careful blank expression on his face. He didn't look at her office, didn't slow down, just kept walking toward the elevator with the dignity of someone who refused to run even as his world burned down around him. Sloan's phone buzzed, a text from Noah. "Picking up Maisie. We'll have my phone off for the evening. Family time." The message felt like a door closing. Like Noah was drawing a line between his work life, which was currently imploding, and his home life, the one thing he could still control. Sloan typed out 3 different responses and deleted them all. What could she possibly say that would help? "Sorry for basically accusing you of corporate espionage. I believe you, but I'm also the CEO, so I have to investigate anyway. Please don't hate me." She settled on, "Understood. Enjoy your evening with Maisie." The response came back almost immediately. "I always do. She's the one thing in my life that's uncomplicated." The implication was clear. Sloan was the complication. Their relationship, whatever it was, had become the problem. She worked until midnight, combing through IT logs and security records, looking for any evidence that would clear Noah definitively. But the more she looked, the worse it seemed. His credentials had accessed the files. The timing matched when he would have had opportunity if he'd stayed late or logged in remotely. There were no obvious signs of hacking or credential theft. On paper, Noah looked guilty, and Sloan had no idea how to prove he wasn't. The next morning, she called an emergency senior leadership meeting. Gavin was there, looking pleased with himself. David Hernandez from the PMO looked worried. The CFO, general counsel, and head of HR all wore expressions of professional concern masking personal speculation. "We have a situation," Sloan began, and laid out the facts as clinically as she could manage. The access logs, the anonymous email, the unusual trading activity, the need to investigate before this became a bigger scandal. "What are you recommending?" the general counsel asked. Sloan took a breath. This was the moment, the decision that would define how this all played out. I'm recommending we suspend Noah Lane pending a full investigation, she said, and felt something inside her crack. We'll maintain his salary and benefits, but he'll be on administrative leave until we determine what actually happened. If he's innocent, we'll reinstate him with a formal apology. If he's guilty, we'll terminate and pursue legal action. Seems reasonable, Gavin said, and Sloan wanted to throw something at his smug face. I'll handle the suspension personally, Sloan continued. David, I'll need you to redistribute Noah's projects. Make sure nothing falls through the cracks while he's out. David nodded, his expression troubled. Noah's not going to take this well. Probably not, Sloan agreed. But it's the right thing to do. We protect the company's interests while ensuring the investigation is fair and thorough. If Noah's innocent, and I hope he is, then we owe him a clean resolution. She almost choked on the words. If Noah was innocent? She knew he was innocent. Every instinct she had screamed that he was innocent. But she was the CEO, and she had to act like she was objective, like her personal feelings didn't matter, like her heart wasn't breaking at the thought of what she was about to do. The meeting ended, and Sloan returned to her office to draft the suspension letter. The legal language came easily. Administrative leave, pending investigation, full cooperation expected, salary and benefits maintained, no admission of wrongdoing implied. But every word felt like a betrayal. She called Noah at 10 o'clock. He answered on the third ring, and she could hear activity in the background, voices, movement, the ambient noise of the office. Noah, can you come to my office, please? Sloan kept her voice professionally neutral, even though she wanted to scream, wanted to tell him she was sorry, wanted to explain that this wasn't what she wanted, but what she had to do. On my way, Noah said, and hung up. He arrived 5 minutes later, and the moment he walked through her door, Sloan saw that he already knew. He'd seen this coming, had probably spent the entire night preparing himself for exactly this moment. You're suspending me, Noah said. Not a question. Yes, Sloan said, and slid the letter across her desk. Administrative leave, effective immediately, full pay and benefits. The investigation should take no more than 2 weeks, possibly less. Noah picked up the letter but didn't read it. So you've decided I'm guilty. I've decided we need to investigate properly, Sloan corrected. This isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about protecting everyone involved while we determine what actually happened. That's corporate speak for we think you did it, but we need to cover ourselves legally, Noah said flatly. It's corporate speak for this situation is complicated and I'm trying to handle it correctly, Sloan replied, her voice rising despite her best efforts. You think I want to do this? You think this is easy for me? I think you made a choice, Noah said, and his voice was so cold, so different from the warmth she'd grown accustomed to. Between believing in me and protecting your position, and we both know which one you chose. That's not fair, Sloan said. I'm trying to protect both of us. If I don't investigate, if this becomes a scandal, it'll destroy both our careers. My career is already destroyed, Noah said. The moment you suspended me, the moment you let people think I might be a thief, you destroyed it. Even if your investigation clears me, I'll always be the guy who got suspended for stealing company secrets. That doesn't go away. He was right, and Sloan knew it. She told herself the suspension was necessary, was protecting Noah by taking the investigation seriously. But the truth was darker. She was protecting herself, protecting her position, choosing her career over trusting him. And Noah knew it. I'm sorry, Sloan said quietly. I know that's not enough, but I am sorry. For what? Noah asked. For not believing me? For caring more about what the board thinks than about who I actually am? Or for making me think that maybe, for the first time in 2 years, I'd found someone who saw me as more than just a single dad trying to survive? Each question hit like a physical blow, and Sloan felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She didn't get to cry. She'd made this choice. She had to live with it. All of it, Sloan said. I'm sorry for all of it. Noah set the suspension letter down on her desk with careful precision. I need to collect my personal items from my desk. I assume security will escort me out? That's not necessary, Sloan started, but Noah was already shaking his head. It's procedure, he said. For suspended employees, I know the rules. I'll grab my things and go quietly. Wouldn't want to make this harder for you than it already is. The sarcasm in his voice was something new, something bitter and hurt that Sloan had never heard from him before. Noah?
She tried, but he was already walking toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle, looked back at her one last time. I meant what I said yesterday. I care about you. Past tense now, I guess. But I did care. And I thought you cared about me too, beyond just finding me interesting or convenient or whatever this was. But caring means trust, Sloan, and you just proved you don't trust me at all. Then he was gone, and Sloan stood alone in her office, feeling like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. She watched from her window as Noah left the building 20 minutes later, carrying a small box with his personal belongings, a photo of Maisie, the coffee mug with the faded XKCD comic, a few books. He walked to his car without looking back, loaded the box in the trunk, and drove away. And Sloan finally understood what she'd lost. Not just Noah, though that was devastating enough, but the possibility of something real, something genuine, something beyond the carefully controlled performance of her corporate life. She'd had it in her hands, connection, warmth, the chance to be someone's person, and she'd let it go because she was too afraid of losing her position, too committed to protecting her career, too much of a coward to trust her instincts over her fears. Her phone buzzed, a text from Priya. "I hope you know what you're doing." Sloan looked at the message, at the suspension letter still on her desk, at the drawing from Maisie still pinned to her bulletin board. "So do I," she whispered to the empty office. "So do I." But knowing she'd made a mistake and being able to fix it were two entirely different things. The investigation moved forward with the cold efficiency of corporate bureaucracy. The external auditing firm arrived on Thursday, 2 men and a woman in matching dark suits, who set up shop in a conference room and began methodically reviewing every digital footprint Noah had left in the company's systems over the past 6 months. Sloan sat through the initial briefing, listening to them outline their process in language designed to be simultaneously precise and meaningless, and felt increasingly sick. "We'll need access to Mr. Lane's work computer, personal devices if company-owned, email archives, and any shared drives he had access to," the lead auditor said. A man named Peterson who had the kind of aggressively neutral expression that came from years of investigating people's worst moments. "We'll also need to interview his colleagues, supervisors, anyone who might have observed unusual behavior." "How long will this take?" Sloan asked, even though they'd already told her 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they found complications. "Depends on what we find," Peterson said. "If Mr. Lane is innocent, the evidence should show that relatively quickly. If he's not," he trailed off meaningfully. "If he's not," Sloan thought, "then I've failed at reading people so fundamentally that I shouldn't be in charge of anything more complicated than a lemonade stand." She authorized everything they needed, signed the paperwork, and tried to focus on the dozens of other responsibilities that came with running a company. But her concentration was shot. She'd catch herself staring at Noah's empty collaboration space on the 3rd floor, or checking her phone for texts that didn't come, or wondering what he was doing with his suddenly free days. Priya found her like that on Friday afternoon, standing at her office window looking at nothing, her coffee gone cold on her desk. "You look terrible," Priya said bluntly. "When's the last time you ate?" Sloan couldn't remember. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're a disaster." Priya walked over and physically turned Sloan away from the window. "And before you tell me it's because of the investigation stress, we both know that's not the whole truth." "I suspended an innocent man," Sloan said quietly. "I chose protecting my position over believing in someone I care about. That seems like a good reason to be a disaster." "You don't know he's innocent," Priya pointed out, though her tone was gentle. "The investigation isn't finished." "I know," Sloan said. "The same way you know when someone's lying to you, when something doesn't feel right. I know Noah didn't do this, and I suspended him anyway." Priya was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "You were in an impossible position. The board was breathing down your neck. Gavin was making noise about cover-ups, and you had evidence that looked damning. What were you supposed to do?" "Trust him," Sloan said simply. "I was supposed to trust him. Even if it cost you your job?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Would Sloan have sacrificed her career, her position, everything she'd worked for on faith in a man she'd known for a few months? She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe she was capable of that kind of courage. But the honest answer was more complicated. "I don't know," Sloan admitted. "And that's the problem.
I don't know what I would have chosen if those were really the only two options. But I know what I did choose, and I have to live with that. Her phone rang before Priya could respond. The auditors, asking for another meeting. Sloan went, listened to their preliminary findings, and felt her stomach drop with every word. We've identified several anomalies, Peterson said, spreading printouts across the conference table like he was building a prosecution case. Mr. Lane's access patterns show unusual activity over the past 2 months. Late-night logins when he's supposedly at home, file downloads that don't correlate with his assigned projects, searches in the company directory for executive contact information. Noah leaves at 5:30 every day, Sloan said. If there are late-night logins, someone else must be using his credentials. Possibly, Peterson agreed, but the logins originate from his home IP address. Either he's lying about his evening routine or someone is accessing the company network from his home computer. Sloan's mind raced. Noah's home computer. If someone wanted to frame him, they'd need access to his home network, his devices. But who had that kind of access? And why target Noah specifically? What kind of files was he downloading? Sloan asked. Peterson consulted his notes. Project specifications mostly, nothing obviously confidential on its own, but taken together, they paint a picture of someone gathering information about company operations and structure, the kind of information that would be valuable to a competitor. Or the kind of information a project manager would legitimately need for his job, Sloan countered. We're considering all possibilities, Peterson said in that maddeningly neutral tone. But you should prepare for the possibility that Mr. Lane may have been engaged in corporate espionage for some time. The Meridian merger files might just be the tip of the iceberg. The meeting lasted another hour, each minute adding weight to the case against Noah. By the time Sloan returned to her office, it was past 7 and the building was mostly empty. She sat at her desk and pulled up Noah's personnel file again, reading through 6 years of performance reviews, project completions, manager comments. Every single evaluation praised his reliability, his integrity, his calm competence under pressure. Not one person in 6 years had ever suggested Noah was anything other than exactly what he appeared to be, a good employee trying to balance work and single parenthood. Had she been that wrong about him? Had the past few months been an elaborate performance, Noah getting close to her to gain access to sensitive information? The thought made her physically ill, but she forced herself to consider it objectively. Except she couldn't be objective, because when she thought about Noah, she didn't see a corporate spy or a master manipulator. She saw the man who'd crouched down to adjust his daughter's raincoat with patient attention. She saw the father who left every day at 5:30 because Maisie needed him. She saw the widower who still wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck because he wasn't ready to fully let go. Those weren't the actions of someone running a con. Those were the actions of someone trying to survive with his integrity intact. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You need to look closer at Gavin Crowe. Sloan stared at the message, her pulse quickening. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. She waited 5 minutes, then 10, but the mysterious texter had apparently said everything they intended to say. Look closer at Gavin Crowe. What did that mean? Gavin was the one who'd brought the security breach to her attention in the first place. If Gavin was involved, why would he expose the very crime he was committing? Unless that was the point. Unless Gavin had orchestrated this entire thing and was using Noah as a scapegoat to cover his own tracks. Sloan's mind spun through the possibilities. Gavin had been passed over for CFO twice. He had financial expertise and access to systems. He'd been the one to discover the access logs and bring them to her attention. He'd pushed for immediate suspension, for treating Noah as guilty before the investigation even started, and he'd been the one to suggest that Sloan's relationship with Noah compromised her judgment, planting seeds of doubt about whether she could be objective. What if the whole thing was a setup? What if Gavin had stolen Noah's credentials, accessed the merger files, and created a trail that pointed directly at Noah while simultaneously implicating Sloan in covering for him? It was paranoid. It was conspiracy thinking. But the more Sloan thought about it, the more sense it made. She called the auditors. I need you to expand your investigation, she said without preamble. Look at everyone who had access to modify server permissions. Specifically, I want you to look at Gavin Crowe's activity over the past 2 months. Peterson sounded surprised, but professional. Are you suggesting Mr.
Crow might be involved? I'm suggesting we look at all possibilities, Sloan said, throwing his own words back at him, including the possibility that someone set Noah Lane up. She hung up before Peterson could argue and immediately called the company's IT director, a woman named Sandra Kim, who'd been with TechCore since the beginning and knew every system inside and out. Sandra, I need a favor, Sloan said, and I need you to keep it completely confidential. Okay. Sandra sounded cautious, which was fair given the current climate. Can you trace who accessed my computer the morning that Noah's permissions were modified? I left it unlocked for maybe 10 minutes. I need to know if anyone used it during that window. I can try, Sandra said, but if someone knew what they were doing, they could have covered their tracks pretty well. Try anyway, Sloan said. Please. She spent the rest of the evening in her office, going through financial records and audit trails, looking for any anomaly that might point to Gavin. She found small things, expense reports that seemed slightly inflated, travel reimbursements for trips that didn't quite match the company calendar, nothing definitively wrong, but enough to make her suspicious. At midnight, Sandra called back. You were right, Sandra said, and Sloane's heart leaped. Someone did access your computer that morning. They were careful, but not careful enough. They left a keylogger trace that captured their own credentials when they typed in the permission modification. Whose credentials? Sloan asked, though she already knew. Gavin Crow's, Sandra confirmed. He used your computer to modify Noah's permissions, making it look like you authorized the access. Then Noah's credentials were used from a remote location. I'm still tracing that, but it looks like someone accessed the network through a VPN that masked the real IP address. Can you prove this? Sloan demanded. Evidence that would hold up in court if necessary? Give me until morning, Sandra said. I want to document everything properly. But yes, I think I can prove Gavin framed Noah Lane. Sloan thanked her and hung up, then sat in the dark office, feeling a mixture of relief and rage so intense she was shaking. Noah was innocent. She'd known it, had felt it in her bones, but now she had proof. Gavin had orchestrated this entire thing, had stolen confidential information and framed Noah for it, had manipulated the investigation, had played on Sloane's fears about appearing compromised, and she'd let him. She'd suspended Noah, had doubted him, had chosen protecting herself over trusting him. The question now was what to do about it. She could wait for the auditors to finish their investigation, let the evidence emerge through official channels. That was the safe play, the one that protected her from accusations of rushing to judgment. Or she could act now, could call an emergency board meeting, expose Gavin before he had a chance to cover his tracks further, reinstate Noah immediately with a full public apology. The second option was risky. If she was wrong, if the evidence didn't hold up, she'd look impulsive and personally compromised. The board might remove her for acting emotionally instead of strategically. But if she was right, and everything in her screamed that she was, then every hour Noah remained suspended was another hour of injustice, another moment where his reputation was being destroyed while the real criminal went free. Sloan made her decision. She called Richard Kaufman at 12:30 in the morning, waking him from sleep. This better be important, Richard said groggily. It is, Sloan said. I need an emergency board meeting, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., in person if possible, video conference if not. What's going on? I have evidence that Noah Lane was framed, Sloan said, and I know who did it, but I need the board's authority to move forward with what I'm planning. Richard was silent for a moment, then she heard rustling as he presumably sat up in bed. How solid is this evidence? Solid enough to bet my job on it, Sloan said, which is effectively what I'm doing by calling you at 12:30 in the morning. All right, Richard said. I'll make the calls. 9 a.m., my office. You better be right about this, Sloan. I am, Sloan said with more confidence than she felt. She spent the rest of the night preparing, building her case, documenting everything she'd found. By 7 a.m., she had a presentation ready, timeline, evidence, a clear narrative of how Gavin had orchestrated the frame-up and why. It was compelling, damning, and absolutely career-ending for Gavin Crow. The board meeting started exactly at 9. 6 board members in person, 2 via video conference, all of them looking skeptical about being summoned on a Saturday morning for what better be worth their time. Sloan didn't waste time with pleasantries.
She laid out her evidence methodically, showing how Gavin had accessed her computer to modify Noah's permissions, how he'd used a VPN to access the merger files using Noah's stolen credentials, how he'd planted the anonymous email to trigger an investigation. Then she showed them what Sandra had found overnight, evidence that Gavin had been embezzling from the company for at least 8 months, skimming small amounts from various budget lines in a way that wouldn't trigger automatic audits. The Meridian merger threatened him, Sloan explained. The acquisition would have brought in new financial oversight, new systems, new auditors who would have caught his embezzling. He needed a distraction, something big enough to occupy everyone's attention while he covered his tracks. So he framed Noah Lane, knowing that a security breach would trigger exactly the kind of investigation that would keep everyone focused on the wrong target. Why Lane specifically? One of the board members asked. Because Noah was close to me, Sloan said, and felt her voice catch slightly. Gavin knew there was speculation about our relationship. By framing Noah, he could accomplish multiple things: create his distraction, get rid of someone who might have been in a position to notice financial irregularities in projects they worked on together, and potentially damage my credibility by suggesting I was too personally involved to see the truth. It was elegant, really. Sociopathic, but elegant. Richard Kaufman leaned forward. You suspended Lane based on this evidence. Why didn't you see the frame-up then? This was the moment Sloan had been dreading, the moment where she had to admit her failure. Because I let fear cloud my judgment, Sloan said quietly. I was so worried about protecting my position, about not appearing compromised, that I didn't trust my own instincts. I knew Noah was innocent. Every interaction I'd had with him, everything I knew about his character, told me he couldn't have done this. But I suspended him anyway because it seemed like the safe professional choice. I was wrong, and Noah paid the price for my cowardice. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Richard spoke, his voice careful. What are you recommending we do? Fire Gavin Crowe immediately. Pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and corporate espionage. Reinstate Noah Lane with full back pay, a formal public apology, and whatever compensation our legal team thinks appropriate for the damage to his reputation. And then let me resign if the board feels my judgment in this matter disqualifies me from continuing as CEO. You're offering to resign? Another board member sounded surprised. I'm offering to face consequences for my mistakes, Sloan said. I failed one of my employees. If the board believes that failure is serious enough to warrant removal, I'll accept that decision. More silence. Then Richard said, We need to discuss this privately. Wait outside, please. Sloan left the conference room and stood in the hallway, her heart pounding. She'd just put her career on the line for Noah, had admitted to failures that would normally be glossed over or spun more favorably. But she was done with spin, done with protecting herself at the expense of doing what was right. 20 minutes later, Richard called her back in. The board has decided to accept your recommendations regarding Mr. Crowe and Mr. Lane, Richard said. Security is already escorting Gavin out of the building. Our legal team will handle the criminal referral. As for your position, Sloan braced herself. We're satisfied that you acted appropriately once you had complete information, Richard continued. The initial suspension of Mr. Lane, while unfortunate, was defensible given the evidence you had at the time. Your work overnight to uncover the truth and your willingness to admit mistakes shows exactly the kind of leadership we want. The board votes to retain you as CEO. Relief flooded through Sloan so intensely she felt lightheaded. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Richard said. You still have to fix this mess with Noah Lane, and given what you've told us about your personal involvement, that's not going to be easy. No, Sloan thought, it wasn't going to be easy at all. She left the board meeting and went directly to her office, where Priya was waiting with coffee and a knowing look. I heard Gavin got walked out by security, Priya said. Want to tell me what happened? Noah was innocent, Sloan said. Gavin framed him. It's a long story, but the short version is I was right to trust my instincts and wrong to let fear override them. So what now? Now I have to call Noah, Sloan said, looking at her phone like it was a live grenade, and somehow convince him that I'm sorry, that I believe in him, that I want to make this right, even though I have no idea if he'll ever forgive me. He'll forgive you, Priya said confidently. He's that kind of person. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, Sloan said quietly. Probably not, Priya agreed, But that's not really the point, is it? The point is whether you're brave enough to ask for it anyway. Sloane picked up her phone and dialed Noah's number before she could lose her nerve. It rang 4 times, and she was preparing to leave a voicemail when he answered. Sloane. Noah's voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Noah. Hi. Sloane stopped, took a breath. I need to talk to you. In person. Are you free? I'm suspended, Noah said flatly. I'm free every day. All day. It's amazing how much free time you have when your career has been destroyed. The bitterness in his voice cut deep, but Sloane deserved it. I have news, she said. Good news. About the investigation. Can I come to you, or we could meet somewhere neutral if you'd prefer? Noah was quiet for so long Sloane thought he might have hung up. Then he sighed. I'm at the playground with Maisie, North Park, by the elementary school. You can meet us here if you want. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Sloane said. She drove to North Park in a daze, her mind racing through everything she needed to say, everything she wanted to explain. Sorry didn't seem adequate. Nothing seemed adequate for what she'd put him through. The playground was busy with Saturday morning families. Kids on swings, parents clustered on benches with coffee, the ambient noise of childhood joy that seemed almost surreal given what Sloane was about to do. She spotted Noah immediately, standing near the slide watching Maisie climb up the ladder with intense concentration. He saw her approaching and said something to Maisie, who waved enthusiastically. Sloane waved back, her heart clenching at the little girl's uncomplicated happiness. Hey, Noah said as she reached him. His expression was guarded, his posture defensive. He'd built walls back up, and Sloane didn't blame him. Hey, Sloane said. Thanks for seeing me. You said you had news. I did. I do. Sloane took a breath. You were framed. Gavin Crowe stole your credentials, accessed the merger files, set you up to take the fall for his own embezzling. We have proof. The board met this morning and fired him. Criminal charges are pending. Noah stared at her, his expression unreadable. I'm cleared? Completely, definitively. Your suspension is lifted effective immediately. You're welcome back to work Monday with full back pay and a formal apology from the company. We'll also be issuing a company-wide communication explaining what happened and clearing your name publicly. I was innocent, Noah said, and his voice was so carefully controlled it hurt to hear. I told you I was innocent. I know. But you didn't believe me. I did believe you, Sloane said desperately. But I let fear override that belief. Fear of losing my job, fear of looking compromised, fear of being wrong. And I'm so sorry, Noah. You deserved better. You deserved someone who would fight for you without hesitation, and instead you got me second-guessing everything because I was too much of a coward to trust my own judgment. Maisie called out from the top of the slide, Daddy, watch me! Noah turned to watch his daughter slide down, caught her at the bottom, then sent her running back to the ladder. Only then did he look back at Sloane. You destroyed my reputation, Noah said quietly. Maybe the company will send out a memo, maybe people will read it, but they'll always remember that I was suspended for stealing company secrets. Even if I'm cleared, that stain doesn't wash off. I know, Sloane said, and tears were threatening now, but she refused to let them fall. And I will spend however long it takes making this right. I'll personally speak to every department, every manager, everyone who needs to hear directly from me that you were innocent and that I failed you. I'll give you the highest performance rating possible, a promotion if you want it, whatever you need to rebuild your career here. Or if you'd rather leave, I'll write you a recommendation so glowing you'll have offers within a week.
You think a promotion fixes this? Noah asked, and now there was anger in his voice, the first real emotion he'd shown. You think a good recommendation makes up for what you put me through? No, Sloane said. Nothing makes up for it. But I'm offering anyway because I don't know what else to do. Tell me what you need, Noah. Tell me how to fix this. I needed you to trust me, Noah said. Last week when I told you I didn't do it, I needed you to believe me without evidence, without proof, just based on knowing who I am as a person. That's what I needed. Everything else is damage control. He was right, and the truth of it broke something in Sloane's chest. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Maisie came running over, her cheeks flushed from playing. Sloane, did you come to play with us? Not today, sweetheart, Noah said gently, but his eyes never left Sloane's face. Sloane has to go back to work. But it's Saturday, Maisie protested.
CEOs work on Saturdays sometimes, Noah explained. Maisie considered this, then looked at Sloane with a child's uncomplicated directness. Are you still sad, like you were before? The question caught Sloane off guard. What do you mean? Last time I saw you at your office, you looked sad, Maisie explained, even though you smiled. Daddy says sometimes grown-ups smile even when they're sad inside. Out of the mouths of babes, Sloane thought. Yeah, honey, I'm still a little sad. Why? Because I hurt someone I care about, Sloane said honestly. And I don't know if he'll forgive me. Maisie looked at her father with that peculiar wisdom that children sometimes have. Daddy says forgiveness is when you love someone more than you're mad at them. Do you love Sloane, Daddy? Noah closed his eyes briefly, and Sloane saw pain flash across his face. That's complicated, Maisie. No, it's not, Maisie said with 4-year-old certainty. Either you do or you don't.
I do, Noah said quietly, and Sloane's breath caught. But love isn't always enough. Mommy used to say love makes everything possible, Maisie said. Even hard things. Noah crouched down to his daughter's level. Mommy was right about a lot of things. But this is grown-up stuff, okay? Sloane and I need to figure some things out. Maisie nodded seriously, then hugged her father before running back to the playground. Noah stood slowly, and when he looked at Sloane, his expression was raw in a way she'd never seen before. I do love you, he said. I didn't want to, didn't plan to, tried really hard not to, but I do. And that's what makes this so hard. Because I love you, and you still chose protecting yourself over believing in me. How do I trust that won't happen again? How do we build something real when you've already shown me that your career will always come first? I don't know, Sloane admitted. I can't promise I won't make mistakes.
Can't promise I'll always make the right choice. But I can promise that I'll try, every single day, to be worthy of your trust. And I can promise that I love you too, so much it terrifies me, and that I want to find a way to make this work. I need time, Noah said finally, to think, to process, to figure out what I want. Coming back to TechCore, working for you after everything that's happened, it's a lot. Take all the time you need, Sloane said. I'll be here. Whenever you're ready to talk, to try, to figure this out together, I'll be here. Noah nodded, then looked past her to where Maisie was playing. I should get back to her. Thanks for coming to tell me about Gavin and for clearing my name. It's the least I could do, Sloane said. She walked back to her car, feeling the weight of everything they'd said and everything they hadn't. Noah loved her. But love, as he'd pointed out, wasn't always enough. Not when trust had been broken. Not when the foundation they'd been building had cracked so fundamentally. Sloane drove home and spent the rest of the day alone in her apartment, thinking about choices and consequences, about courage and cowardice, about what it meant to love someone and whether that love was enough to overcome the mistakes she'd made. She didn't have answers, but she had hope, fragile and tentative, that maybe Noah would find a way to forgive her, and maybe that would be enough to start building something new. The week that followed was one of the longest of Sloane's life. She drafted and redrafted the company-wide communication about what had happened with Gavin and Noah, trying to strike the impossible balance between transparency and discretion, between vindicating Noah and not turning him into office gossip fodder all over again. The final version was straightforward and brief. Gavin Crowe had been terminated for misconduct including embezzlement and falsifying evidence. Noah Lane had been fully cleared of all suspicion and reinstated with the company's sincere apologies. Anyone with questions should direct them to HR. She sent it Monday morning and watched the office react in real time through her glass walls. Shock, mostly. Gavin had been good at appearing competent and trustworthy, and the revelation that he'd been stealing and manipulating everyone for months sent ripples of unease through every department. But mixed with the shock was something else. Relief, maybe, or validation, from the people who'd never quite believed Noah could have done what he was accused of. David Hernandez appeared at her door an hour after the email went out, looking tired but satisfied. I knew it, he said without preamble. I knew Noah didn't do it. That kid's got more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. You could have said something, Sloan pointed out. I did, David said. In my interview with the auditors, told them they were barking up the wrong tree, that Noah Lane was the last person at this company who'd steal anything. But I'm not the CEO. My opinion doesn't carry the same weight as yours. The implicit criticism stung because it was accurate. David had trusted his judgment of Noah's character. Sloan, who'd known Noah more intimately, who'd spent hours in conversation with him, who'd watched him parent his daughter with patient devotion, had still let fear override her instincts. Is he coming back? David asked. I don't know, Sloan admitted. I told him the job was his whenever he wanted it, but he needed time to think. Can't blame him, David said. Being suspended like that, having everyone think you're a thief even for a few days, that leaves a mark. Even with the truth out now, there'll be people who wonder if maybe the company's just covering something up. I know, Sloan said quietly. That's what makes this so unforgivable. I didn't just hurt Noah. I damaged his reputation in a way that might never fully heal. David studied her for a long moment. You care about him, as more than just an employee. It wasn't a question, but Sloan answered anyway. Yes. Does he know that? Yes, not that it matters much now. Sloan gestured at the email still displayed on her screen. I proved I'm willing to sacrifice him to protect my position. That's not really the foundation for a healthy relationship. Maybe not, David agreed, but it's also human. We all make mistakes when we're scared. The question is what you do after, how you try to make it right. He left, and Sloan sat with his words, turning them over in her mind. She'd apologized. She'd cleared Noah's name. She'd given him space. What else could she do? The answer came to her slowly over the next few days, crystallizing into clarity like ice forming on a window. She'd been approaching this wrong, treating it like a problem to be solved through the right combination of apologies and professional gestures. But that wasn't what Noah needed. What Noah needed was for her to understand what she'd actually done. Not just the suspension, not just the failure to trust him, but the deeper betrayal of showing him that her career would always come first. If she wanted Noah to trust her again, she needed to prove that he mattered more than her position. And there was only one way to do that convincingly. On Thursday morning, Sloan scheduled a meeting with Richard Kaufman. I've been thinking about the board's offer to let me stay on as CEO, Sloan said, sitting across from him in his downtown office with its view of Elliott Bay and the mountains beyond. And I'm not sure it's the right decision. Richard's eyebrows rose. You want to resign after we just voted to keep you? I want to do what's best for the company, Sloan said carefully. And I'm not sure that's me. Not right now. I made a serious error in judgment with Noah. Yes, I eventually figured out the truth, but only after suspending an innocent man and damaging his reputation. That kind of mistake raises questions about my leadership. The board doesn't think so, Richard pointed out. We reviewed everything. You acted reasonably given the evidence you had at the time. But that's the problem, Sloan said, leaning forward. I had evidence beyond the access logs. I had months of knowing Noah's character. I had every instinct telling me he couldn't have done this. And I ignored all of that because I was afraid of looking compromised. That's not good leadership. That's cowardice. Richard was quiet for a moment, studying her with the shrewd expression that had made him a successful board chair for 15 years. This isn't really about the company, is it? This is about Noah Lane. It's about both, Sloan said honestly. Yes, I care about Noah. More than is probably appropriate for a CEO to care about an employee. And yes, I failed him in a way that might be unforgivable. But I also failed the company by letting personal fear override professional judgment. Those two things are connected. What are you proposing? Richard asked. I'm proposing I step down as CEO, Sloan said, and felt a strange sense of relief as the words left her mouth. Effective in 3 months, to give the board time to find a replacement and ensure a smooth transition. I'll stay on as a senior advisor if you want me, or I'll leave entirely if you'd prefer, but I don't think I should be CEO anymore. And this has nothing to do with wanting to date Noah Lane without the complication of being his boss? Richard's tone was dry, but not unkind. It has everything to do with that, Sloan admitted, but it's also the right thing to do regardless. I spent my entire adult life building my career, sacrificing relationships and personal happiness because I thought success would be enough. And then I met someone who made me realize it wasn't enough, that there was something else I wanted. So when I had to choose between him and my job, I chose my job. And I hate that I did that. I hate who it made me. She paused, surprised by how much emotion was leaking through her carefully maintained professional facade. I don't want to be the person who always chooses career over people, who protects her position at the expense of her integrity. I want to be someone who's brave enough to put love first, even when it's risky, even when it might cost everything. And I can't be that person as long as I'm clinging to this job like it's the only thing that defines me. Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed. You know what? I believe you, which is unfortunate because you're actually a pretty good CEO when you're not having an existential crisis. Despite everything, Sloane smiled slightly. Thank you, I think. Well, if you're serious about this, I'll bring it to the board, Richard said. But I want you to think carefully before we announce anything. Stepping down is a big decision. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. I am, Sloane said with more certainty than she'd felt about anything in weeks. This is right. She left Richard's office feeling lighter than she had since the whole disaster started. She didn't know if Noah would forgive her, didn't know if stepping down as CEO would make any difference to him, or if the damage was already too permanent to repair. But at least she'd know she'd tried. At least she'd proven, to herself if no one else, that she was capable of choosing differently. That evening, she drafted her resignation announcement. It took hours to get the tone right. Grateful for the opportunity, confident in the company's future, personal reasons for stepping down without elaborating on what those reasons were. She sent it to Richard for review and then sat in her apartment staring at her phone, debating whether to text Noah. She'd promised to give him space, but didn't he deserve to know what she was planning? Or would telling him look like she was trying to manipulate his feelings, using her resignation as leverage to guilt him into forgiving her? In the end, she decided to wait. The board would need to approve her resignation, and there were a dozen logistical details to work out before anything became public. Better to let Noah hear the news when it was final, rather than burdening him with her plans and making him feel responsible for her choices. But the waiting was agony. Every day that passed without hearing from him felt like confirmation that she'd lost him for good, that even stepping down as CEO wouldn't be enough to bridge the gap her betrayal had created. A week after their conversation at the playground, Sloane's phone rang at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. She was home, attempting to eat takeout Thai food while reviewing transition documents for whoever would replace her as CEO. When Noah's name appeared on her screen, she nearly dropped the phone. Noah, she said, her voice coming out more breathless than she'd intended. Hi. Hi, Noah said, and there was something different in his voice, less guarded than the last time they'd spoken, though still careful. Is this a good time? Yes, any time is a good time for you. Sloane set down her food and moved to the couch, curling up like she was physically protecting herself from whatever Noah was about to say. I've been thinking, Noah said, about everything that happened, about what you said at the playground, about us. Okay, Sloane said, her heart pounding. I'm still angry, Noah said bluntly. I'm angry that you didn't trust me. Angry that I had to go through that whole nightmare, angry that even now, with everything cleared up, I can feel people looking at me differently at the grocery store, at Maisie's daycare, like they're wondering if maybe there's some truth to what they heard. I know, Sloane said quietly. You have every right to be angry. But I also understand why you made the choices you made, Noah continued. You were in an impossible position. The evidence looked damning. You had the board breathing down your neck, Gavin pushing for immediate action, and your entire career potentially on the line. I don't agree with what you did, but I understand it. Sloane felt tears welling up, but fought them back. That doesn't make it okay. No, Noah agreed. It doesn't. But it makes it human. And I've spent the past week thinking about what Maisie said at the playground, about forgiveness being when you love someone more than you're mad at them. She's 4 years old and she somehow understands something I've been struggling with for days. What's that? Sloane asked. That love means accepting people's imperfections, Noah said. Claire used to tell me that all the time. I'd get frustrated with myself for some mistake, some failure, and she'd remind me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, trying your best, and being willing to grow. And I think maybe I needed to hear that again from my 4-year-old daughter channeling her mother's wisdom to remember that I'm not perfect either. I've made plenty of mistakes. Maybe not this particular mistake, but others. Sloane didn't know what to say. The possibility of forgiveness felt too fragile to touch, like it might shatter if she breathed wrong. I want to try, Noah said finally. If you're still interested, if you still want this, want us, I want to try to make it work.
Yes, Sloane said immediately, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Yes, I want to try. More than anything. But things need to change, Noah said firmly. I can't work for you, Sloane. Not directly. The power dynamic is too complicated, and I think we both know that contributed to what happened. If we're going to do this, if we're going to build something real, it needs to be as equals. I'm stepping down as CEO, Sloane said, and heard Noah's sharp intake of breath. I haven't announced it yet. The board needs to approve, and we need to plan the transition, but I gave Richard Kaufman my resignation last week. 3 months from now, I won't be anyone's boss. You're stepping down? Noah sounded shocked. Because of me? Because of me, Sloane corrected. Because I don't want to be the person who always chooses career over people. Because I realized that the job I thought defined me was actually limiting me, keeping me from being the person I want to be.
You helped me see that, but the decision is mine. Sloane, I don't want you to give up your career for me, Noah said, and she could hear the worry in his voice. That's too much. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm not giving it up, Sloane said. I'm choosing differently. There's a difference. I spent 15 years building my career, sacrificing everything else, telling myself it was enough. And then I met you and Maisie, and I realized I wanted more. Not instead of success, but alongside it. I want a career that leaves room for love, for family, for a life that's about more than quarterly earnings and board meetings. She paused, then added quietly, You told me at the playground that your career will always come first. I'm showing you that's not true anymore. I'm choosing you, Noah. I'm choosing us. Not because you demanded it, not to manipulate you into forgiving me, but because it's what I want. It's who I want to be. Noah was silent for so long that Sloane checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then she heard him exhale slowly. I don't know what to say, Noah admitted. I came into this conversation planning to tell you we could try dating, but slowly, carefully, with lots of boundaries. And now you're telling me you're restructuring your entire life. Too much? Sloane asked, suddenly worried she'd overstepped. No, Noah said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Not too much, just unexpected, and kind of amazing, and terrifying. Welcome to how I feel about you, Sloane said. Unexpected, amazing, and terrifying pretty much covers it. Noah laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine and made Sloane's heart lift in a way she'd thought might not be possible anymore. Can I see you? Noah asked. Tomorrow, maybe? I'm working from home this week, still not ready to face the office, but my father can watch Maisie for a few hours. We could have dinner, talk about what this looks like, how we move forward. I'd like that, Sloane said, very, very much. They made plans for the next evening, and after they hung up, Sloane sat in her apartment feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope mixed with genuine excitement, the sense that her life was opening up into possibilities she'd never let herself consider before. The next day, Sloane told Priya about her resignation. You're doing what? Priya stared at her like she'd announced plans to join a circus. You're stepping down as CEO? Are you having a breakdown? Should I be calling a doctor? I'm fine, Sloane said, though she was smiling at Priya's reaction. Better than fine, actually. I'm making a choice. To throw away your career for a man? Priya's voice was climbing toward outrage. Sloane, I love Noah. He's great. But this is insane. I'm not throwing away my career, Sloane explained patiently. I'm reshaping it. There are other jobs, other opportunities, other ways to be successful that don't require me to sacrifice everything else. I've spent 15 years being CEO track, and you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of being lonely. I'm tired of measuring my worth by my job title. I'm tired of making choices based on fear instead of love. Priya sat down heavily in the chair across from Sloane's desk. You're serious. Completely serious. And this is really what you want. Not what you think you should want, not what will fix things with Noah, but what you actually want. Yes, Sloane said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. This is what I want. Priya studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, then I support you. Even though I think you're crazy, even though I'm going to miss working for the best boss I've ever had. If this is really what makes you happy, then I'm behind you 100%. Thank you, Sloane said, feeling a surge of affection for her assistant, who'd become something closer to a friend over the past 6 months. And for what it's worth, whoever replaces me will be lucky to inherit you. Damn right they will, Priya said. Now, tell me about this dinner with Noah. What are you going to wear? Because if you show up in a business suit, I'm staging an intervention. Sloane laughed, and they spent the next 20 minutes discussing wardrobe choices like normal women planning normal dates, and it felt wonderful. That evening, Sloane arrived at the restaurant Noah had chosen, a quiet Italian place in Ballard, far enough from downtown that they were unlikely to run into anyone from work. She'd taken Priya's advice and skipped the business suit, opting instead for dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her feel like a person rather than a position. Noah was already there, sitting at a corner table and looking almost as nervous as Sloane felt. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between them like a question mark. Then Sloane stepped forward and hugged him, and after a moment's hesitation, Noah hugged her back. It was tentative and careful, not the embrace of people who knew each other's rhythms yet, but it was a start. They sat down, ordered wine, and spent the first 10 minutes making small talk about safe topics. Maisie's latest obsession with becoming a marine biologist instead of a zoologist, the unseasonably warm October weather, a book Noah was reading about urban planning that he found unexpectedly fascinating. Then Noah set down his wine glass and looked at Sloane directly. I need to know something. If you hadn't been caught, if Gavin's frame-up had been better executed and you never found evidence clearing me, would you have believed in me anyway? Eventually? The question was direct and painful, and Sloane knew her answer mattered more than anything else they'd discussed. I don't know, she said honestly. I want to say yes, that I would have figured it out, that my faith in you would have won out. But the truth is, I don't know. I was so deep in fear, so convinced that trusting my instincts was the same as being naive, that I might have just convinced myself the evidence was right and my feelings were wrong. Noah's expression tightened and Sloane rushed on. But that's who I was then, the person I'm trying to become now. She would believe you. She would fight for you. She would choose trust over fear even when it was risky. I can't change what happened, Noah. I can't go back and make different choices. But I can promise you that I'm learning, that I'm growing, that the woman sitting here right now understands what actually matters. And what's that? Noah asked quietly. You, Sloane said simply. Maisie. The possibility of building a life that's about more than success and achievement. A life that's about love and connection and being brave enough to be vulnerable. That's what matters. Noah was quiet for a moment, turning his wine glass slowly. I'm scared, he admitted, of getting hurt again, of letting Maisie get attached to you and then having it fall apart, of trusting this feeling between us and finding out it can't survive the real-world complications. I'm scared too, Sloane said. But I think maybe being scared together is better than being safe alone. A smile tugged at Noah's lips. That's very poetic for a CEO. Former CEO, Sloane corrected, in 3 months. After that, I'm just Sloane. You'll never be just anything, Noah said, and there was warmth in his voice now, the guardedness starting to thaw. But I like the idea of getting to know Sloane without the corporate armor. They talked through dinner about practical things, how to navigate their relationship now that the office knew something was happening between them, how to introduce the idea to Maisie without overwhelming her, what Sloane's life might look like after she stepped down. Noah told her about the consulting offers he'd received from former colleagues who'd heard about his vindication, opportunities to work independently that would give him more flexibility with Maisie's schedule. Sloane told him about her vague plans to maybe teach or consult or finally write the book about organizational leadership she'd been thinking about for years. By the time dessert arrived, they'd moved from careful to comfortable, And when Noah reached across the table to take Sloane's hand, it felt natural. "I want to try this," Noah said. "Really try. Not just dating casually, but building something real. But I need you to understand that Maisie comes first, always. If this relationship ever puts her in an uncomfortable position, if she starts to struggle because of our complications, that's when I walk away. Not because I don't care about you, but because she's my priority." "As she should be," Sloane said firmly, "and I would never ask you to choose between us. If anything, I hope I can be someone who adds to Maisie's life, not someone who complicates it." "She already likes you," Noah said, "which honestly terrifies me a little because if this doesn't work out, I'll have to explain to my 4-year-old why someone she cares about isn't around anymore." "Then we'll make it work," Sloane said with more confidence than she felt. "Not because failure isn't an option. We're both grown-ups, we know relationships are complicated. But because I'm committed to trying my hardest. Because you're worth it. Because Maisie's worth it. Because this feeling I get when I'm with you, like I'm finally becoming the person I was always supposed to be, is worth fighting for." Noah squeezed her hand. "When did you become a romantic?" "About 5 minutes after meeting you," Sloane admitted. "It's been very inconvenient." They left the restaurant and walked to the waterfront, talking and laughing and slowly rebuilding the connection that had been damaged but not destroyed. And when Noah kissed her goodnight outside her car, gentle and sweet and full of promise, Sloane felt something click into place in her chest. This was right. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but right. The next few weeks passed in a strange mixture of ending and beginning. The board formally accepted Sloane's resignation and began the search for her replacement. The company issued a press release framing it as Sloane pursuing new opportunities after successfully navigating a challenging transition period. Industry publications speculated about what she'd do next, and headhunters called with opportunities at other companies, but Sloane politely declined them all. She had other plans. Noah returned to work at TechCore, but requested a transfer to a different division so he'd no longer report through Sloane's chain of command. David Hernandez welcomed him back with open arms and immediately assigned him to lead their most visible project, both a vote of confidence and a clear signal to the rest of the company that Noah Lane was trusted and valued. And slowly, carefully, Sloane and Noah built their relationship. Coffee dates before work became dinner dates after. Casual texts during the day became phone calls in the evening. Noah introduced her to his father, a quiet man in his 70s who'd lost his wife 15 years ago and had stepped in to help raise Maisie with the devotion of someone who understood what grief and love could coexist. Maisie, for her part, accepted Sloane's presence in their lives with the easy adaptability of children. She started requesting that Sloane join them for zoo visits and library trips, would call Sloane to tell her about elephants or rocks, or whatever her current fixation was, gradually wove Sloane into the fabric of their family routines. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Noah pulled back, when old fears surfaced and he needed space. There were times when Sloane caught herself falling into old patterns of prioritizing work over everything else, and had to consciously choose differently. They argued sometimes about small things and occasionally about bigger ones, learning each other's rhythms and boundaries and tender places. But they kept trying, kept showing up, kept choosing each other. 2 months after that first dinner, on a cold December evening when Seattle was briefly beautiful under a rare blanket of snow, Sloane found herself at Noah's house for what had become their regular Friday night tradition: pizza, a Disney movie for Maisie, and then adult conversation once the 4-year-old was asleep. Maisie had picked Moana for the dozenth time, and they were halfway through the movie when she climbed into Sloane's lap, something she'd started doing recently with the casual affection of a child who decided someone was safe. "Sloane?" Maisie said during a quiet moment in the film. "Yeah, sweetie?" "Are you going to marry my daddy?" The question came out of nowhere, and Sloane felt Noah tense beside her on the couch. They'd been careful not to define their relationship in front of Maisie beyond Daddy's special friend, trying to protect her from adult complications. "I don't know," Sloane said honestly. "Would that be okay with you if I did?" Maisie considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "Would you live here?" "Probably," Sloane said, glancing at Noah, who was watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. "And would you make Daddy happy? Because sometimes he's still sad about Mommy, and I think he needs someone who makes him happy. Sloane's throat tightened. I would try very hard to make him happy, but it's okay for him to still be sad about your mommy sometimes. That just means he loved her very much. Can you love someone new and still miss someone who's gone? Maisie asked, and it was such a profound question from such a young person that Sloane looked to Noah for help. Yes, Noah said quietly, reaching over to smooth his daughter's hair. You absolutely can. Your heart doesn't run out of room for loving people. Oh, Maisie said, satisfied with this answer. Then I think it would be good if you married Sloane. She makes good pancakes. The crisis apparently resolved, Maisie turned her attention back to the movie. Sloane and Noah exchanged glances over her head, amused and tender and tinged with the awareness that they'd just crossed some invisible threshold. After Maisie went to bed, they sat together on the couch with wine and the kind of comfortable silence that comes from growing familiar with each other's presence. Sorry about that, Noah said eventually. The marriage question, I don't know where she got that idea. Probably from every Disney movie we've watched, Sloane said with a smile. They all end with weddings. She's pattern matching. Still, Noah said, we've only been officially together for 2 months. Marriage seems a little premature. Does it? Sloane asked, surprising herself. We've known each other for almost a year. We've been through more in that time than most couples face in years, and I'm more certain about you than I've been about anything in my life. Noah turned to look at her fully. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I love you, Sloane said clearly. I'm saying I want to build a life with you and Maisie. I'm saying that when my 4-month-old successor asks me what I want to do next, I want the answer to be build a family with Noah Lane. Is that too fast? Too much? It's terrifying, Noah said honestly. After Claire died, I told myself I'd never do this again. Never open myself up to losing someone I love. Never give Maisie a mother figure who might disappear. But then you happened, and suddenly I'm thinking about futures I thought were closed to me. I'm not going anywhere, Sloane said firmly. Not unless you want me to. I've already proven I'll choose you over my career. I'll keep choosing you every single day for as long as you'll let me. Noah set down his wine glass and took both of Sloane's hands in his. What if I said yes? The echo of that moment at the birthday party hung between them, but this time it wasn't a joke. This time it was a question, serious and open and full of possibility. What if I said yes to building a life together, Noah continued, to eventually getting married when we're both ready, to you becoming part of this family permanently? What would that look like? It would look like me finding a new job that has reasonable hours and doesn't consume my entire identity, Sloane said. It would look like us figuring out if we live here or at my place or somewhere new. It would look like me learning how to be a parental figure to Maisie without trying to replace Claire. It would look like messy and complicated and probably occasionally disastrous because that's what families are. And you want that? Noah asked. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Sloane said. Noah pulled her closer, and they sat there on his worn couch in his modest house that smelled like pizza and kid shampoo and possibility, and Sloane felt more at home than she ever had in her expensive downtown apartment with its carefully curated furniture and its hollow silence. I love you too, Noah said quietly. In case that wasn't clear, I love you, and it terrifies me, and I'm choosing to be brave anyway because you're right. Being scared together is better than being safe alone. They kissed, and it was sweet and certain and felt like a promise. Not of perfection, but of commitment. Not of ease, but of effort. Not of fairy tale endings, but of real-life beginnings. 3 months later, on a sunny March afternoon, the board held a company-wide town hall to introduce TechCore's new CEO, a woman named Jennifer Santos, who'd successfully run operations for a major competitor and had the kind of steady competence that would serve the company well. Sloane attended as a senior advisor, a role she'd agreed to keep for 6 months to help with the transition, and felt nothing but relief watching someone else field questions about quarterly projections and strategic initiatives. After the meeting, Noah found her in the hallway outside the auditorium. How does it feel? He asked. Watching someone else run your company? It's not my company anymore, Sloane said, and mostly I feel free. No more board meetings at 7 a.m., no more emergency calls about crises I have to solve. Just a normal schedule that lets me have coffee with you in the mornings and dinner with you and Maisie in the evenings. Speaking of evenings, Noah said, and Sloane heard something in his tone that made her pay attention. Maisie and I were talking last night about family and what that means and how it can grow and change. Okay, Sloane said carefully. And she said something that got me thinking, Noah continued. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, and Sloane's breath caught. She said that families are people who love each other and choose to stay together even when things are hard, and that you've proven you're part of our family because you keep choosing us. Noah, Sloane started, but he was already opening the box to reveal a simple, beautiful ring. I know we said we'd wait, Noah said. I know we've only been officially together for 5 months. But Maisie's right. You've proven who you are. You've shown me that you'll choose love over fear, that you'll fight for us even when it costs you. And I don't want to wait anymore to make this official. He took her hand, and Sloane realized they were standing in the hallway of TechCore, that people were starting to notice, that this was about to become a very public moment. Sloane Mercer, Noah said clearly, his voice steady and sure. Will you marry me? For real this time? Sloane felt tears welling up, but she was laughing too, at the full circle of it all, at how a joke that had caused so much pain had led them here. What if I say yes? She asked, echoing his words from that awful day that had started everything. Then I'd say we have a wedding to plan, Noah said, smiling, and a life to build, and a 4-year-old who's going to be impossible to live with because she was right about this whole thing. Then yes, Sloane said clearly, loud enough that the people gathering in the hallway could hear, bearing witness to this moment. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Noah slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and people were applauding, and Sloane felt the last piece of her old life fall away, replaced by something better, something real, something worth every risk, every sacrifice, every terrifying leap into uncertainty. That evening, they told Maisie together, sitting in her bedroom surrounded by stuffed elephants and picture books and all the beautiful chaos of a child's space. So you're going to be my mom? Maisie asked, looking between them with wide eyes. I'm going to be your stepmom, Sloane clarified gently. Your mom will always be your mom. No one can replace her. But I'm going to love you and take care of you and be part of your family, if that's okay with you. Maisie thought about this for a moment. Then she got up, walked over to her dresser, and pulled out a drawing she'd apparently been working on, a picture of 4 stick figures holding hands. That's you and Daddy and me and Grandpa, Maisie explained, pointing to each figure. I drew it a while ago because I hoped you'd stay. I'm staying, Sloane promised, pulling the little girl into a hug. For as long as you'll have me. Forever, Maisie said matter-of-factly. That's how families work. That night, after Maisie was asleep and Noah's father had gone to bed, and it was just the two of them in the quiet house, Sloane and Noah sat together on the back porch, looking at the stars that were barely visible through Seattle's light pollution. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Sloane asked. When I made that stupid joke at the birthday party, did any part of you imagine this? No, Noah admitted. But I hoped. For about 5 seconds, I let myself hope. And then for months after that, I tried not to hope because hoping seemed dangerous. But here we are anyway. Here we are, Sloane agreed. She looked down at the ring on her finger, then up at the stars, then at the man beside her who'd somehow become her entire future. I'm glad I said yes. I'm glad you asked, Noah said, and they both laughed at the absurdity and the beauty of it all. A month later, Sloane stood in front of the entire company at the quarterly all-hands meeting, her last official appearance as senior advisor before she transitioned fully into her new life. Jennifer Santos had asked her to say a few words about her time at TechCore, and Sloane had agreed, though she'd been nervous about what to say. Now, standing at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, she understood what needed to be said. I've spent most of my career believing that success meant sacrificing everything else, Sloane began. That being a good leader meant putting work above relationships, ambition above love, professional growth above personal happiness. And I built a successful career on that belief. But I also built a lonely life. She paused, found Noah in the crowd standing toward the back with David Hernandez. He gave her an encouraging smile. A few months ago, I made a serious mistake, Sloane continued. I let fear override my judgment. I hurt someone I cared about because I was more concerned with protecting my position than with trusting my instincts, and it almost cost me everything that actually matters. She could see people shifting uncomfortably, unsure where this was going. But that mistake taught me something important, Sloane said. That success without connection is hollow. That being right professionally doesn't matter if you're wrong personally. That the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to choose love even when it's risky, is more valuable than any position or title. She stepped away from the podium, a deliberate break from the formal presentation style everyone expected. So I'm going to do something that breaks all the rules about professional boundaries and keeping your personal life separate from work, Sloane said. I'm going to publicly declare that I'm in love with Noah Lane, that I'm going to marry him, that he and his daughter have become the most important parts of my life, and that I don't regret for 1 second choosing this relationship over my career as CEO, because this relationship is teaching me how to be a better person. She found Noah in the crowd again, saw the surprise on his face mixed with warmth and pride. Noah, Sloane said, speaking directly to him across the room full of people, I know we've already done this privately, but I wanted to ask you again publicly, in front of all these witnesses, so everyone knows exactly what my priorities are. Will you marry me? For a moment, the auditorium was absolutely silent. Then Noah started walking toward the stage, and people began to stand, and by the time he reached her, half the company was on their feet. What if I say yes? Noah asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, the question that had started everything echoing through the space. Then I'd say we have a lifetime ahead of us, Sloane said. Then yes, Noah said. Forever yes. He kissed her, and the auditorium erupted in applause and cheers, and Sloane felt something profound settle in her chest. This was her life now. Not the carefully controlled performance of professional success, but the messy, beautiful reality of loving someone and being loved in return. 6 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, exactly 1 year after that disastrous birthday party, Sloane and Noah got married in a small ceremony at a park overlooking the water. Maisie served as flower girl and took her role very seriously, making sure every single petal was distributed exactly right. Noah's father walked Sloane down the aisle since her own parents had stayed in Arizona but sent their love. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Maisie loudly announced, "No, I already said this was a good idea." The laughter that rippled through the gathered guests was warm and genuine, the kind that comes from people who know the full story, who've watched this relationship survive and grow and become something real. When it was time for vows, Sloane looked at Noah and spoke from the heart. "A year ago, I asked you to marry me as a joke," she said, "and you answered seriously, and everything fell apart before it could come together. We've had to rebuild trust, rebuild ourselves, rebuild what we thought our lives would look like. And I'm grateful for every difficult moment because they taught us something important. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, trying your best, and choosing each other every single day. So Noah, I choose you. Today and every day after. I choose us." Noah's vows were simpler but no less meaningful. "I thought my life was over when Claire died. Thought I'd used up my one chance at love and happiness. But you showed me that hearts can heal, that new chapters can begin, that choosing to be brave is always worth it. So I choose you too, Sloane, forever." They exchanged rings, kissed, while Maisie cheered and everyone else applauded, and officially became a family. Not a perfect family, not an uncomplicated one, but a real family built on trust and forgiveness and the courage to keep trying. At the reception, while Maisie was teaching Sloane's former assistant Priya a complicated dance move she'd invented, Noah pulled Sloane onto the makeshift dance floor. "No regrets?" he asked as they swayed together. "Not one," Sloane said honestly. "You?" "Just that I didn't say yes that first time with more conviction," Noah teased. "We could have saved ourselves months of drama." "But then we wouldn't have this story," Sloane pointed out. "The story of how we fell apart and came back together. How we learned what actually matters. How a joke proposal became a real marriage." "True," Noah agreed. He pulled her closer, and they danced under the string lights while their families and friends celebrated around them, and Sloane felt completely, impossibly happy. Later that night, after the reception ended and the guests went home,
and Maisie fell asleep in the car on the way to their new house, the one they'd bought together, big enough for a family that might grow. Noah carried his daughter inside while Sloane followed with her small elephant collection. "Is she okay?" Sloane whispered as Noah tucked Maisie into her new bedroom. "She's perfect," Noah said, smoothing his daughter's hair with infinite tenderness. "We're all perfect." He was right. Not perfect in the sense of flawless, but perfect in the way that mattered. Perfectly imperfect, perfectly real, perfectly theirs.
As they walked to their own room, passing by the drawing Maisie had made months ago of their family holding hands, now framed and hanging in the hallway, Sloane thought about how far they'd come. From that terrible joke to this beautiful reality. From fear and separation to love and commitment. From broken trust to rebuilt foundations stronger than before. "Thank you," Sloane said quietly as they got ready for bed. "For what?" Noah asked. "For saying yes," Sloane said. "That first time, when it was just a joke. For taking me seriously when I didn't deserve it. For giving me a second chance when I'd failed you. For teaching me what it means to be brave enough to love." Noah pulled her close. "Thank you for asking. Both times. For real. And for keeps." They fell asleep together in their new house with their new life stretching out ahead of them, full of possibility and promise, and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing each other every single day, no matter what. And in the morning, when Maisie came running into their room announcing that she'd decided she wanted to be an astronaut now instead of a marine biologist, Sloane looked at Noah and saw her entire future in his smile, complicated and beautiful and exactly right. This was what she'd been missing all those years. Not success or achievement or professional validation, but this. Connection, love, family, a life built on choosing each other, on showing up, on being brave enough to trust and forgive and keep trying. Sloane had asked if Noah would marry her as a joke, and he'd answered seriously. Now, a year later, they'd both answered yes for real. And they would keep answering yes every day for the rest of their lives.